Hey, Steel Watchers, it is mine and especially Eric's favorite time once more.
No! No!
Shush.
No!
Shush.
No!
It is, as you can tell from the screams of torture, it is time for us to start thinking about our top 5 episode for season 3. So, as
Our
always,
top 5 episodes episode.
Yes, exactly. That's how it sounds. That's what I meant. So as always, we welcome and encourage everybody else's contributions as well, because otherwise it's just the two of us talking. And I mean, like, we do that enough. So if anyone wants to submit their top 5 episodes of season 3, please do so. You can send them to the email. That's probably the most preferable spot to send them, so we can just compile them and make a list. And yeah, we will read them. Let us know whether or not you want us to say your name when we read it or not. And
what name you want us to use. If you want to be introduced as Lord Darth Vader. Okay.
I had a student who wanted to be called Batman once, so I did. So yeah, please send us your top 5s so that we can stretch out the episode and pad it. No, I'm serious. Like, we can include it with quality content.
Yes.
That's pretty much all I had to say.
As opposed to what we normally do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Welcome to SteeleWatching, the podcast for Remington Steele fans. I am Eric, and I'm frustrated trying to sort out our sound balance issues because what should have worked didn't work, but what's new in my life? Anyway.
And I'm Sara, and I'm going to the drive-in later to watch a movie. Not as exciting as yours, but yeah.
Well, a drive-in? You guys actually still have a drive-in?
Oh, yeah. There's tons of them in Southern Ontario.
I think we lost our last one here decades ago.
Oh, no.
Anyway.
It's been there since I was like a little baby. It's great. It's great. We get to sit in our car and watch a movie.
Yeah. Can't have as much fun as you used to have. Now that you've got
not
a
with
young
our
one.
child in the back seat, no.
Anyway, we are on season 3, episode 19, Illustrated Steele. And let's see here. It was first aired March 12th, 1985. Written by Carrie Lenhart and John Sackmar. Directed, I think, our first female director, Gabrielle Beaumont.
And interestingly, I wasn't sure if that person was female, because Gabriel can also be a guy's name, and it could just be a spelling thing. But now that you say that, you're right. It is spelled the female way. So I don't know.
I just, I didn't even think about that possibility. So, yeah. Anyway, but I think this was, if I'm not mistaken, our first female director.
It is a woman. Yes. No, direct. Oh, yeah, because we've had writers, but yeah, you're right. I just Googled her, and it is a woman. So yes, you are correct.
Anyway, basically, I'm going with the TV guide listing. I do like some aspects of the production synopsis, but going with the TV guide listing. A cartoonist's life seems to be imitating art when attempts to kill him parallel the adventures of his comic strip character lookalike.
Ooh. Yes.
And of course, the production synopsis begins with, "The funnies are no laughing matter." Which I like that. I like that. But
that is good. I just want to interject, since I Googled her, and this is actually quite interesting. Mm-hmm. She's British, born in Buckinghamshire. Gabrielle Amanda Beaumont was the first woman to make a groundbreaking impact in Hollywood as a prolific director of episodic primetime television. She worked on some of the most popular TV shows of the 80s and 90s, including MASH, Dynasty, Cagney and Lacey, Hill Street Blues, Miami Vice, LA Law, Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. She also became the first female director in charge of Star Trek episodes, working on Star Trek. Sorry, I had to click on the thing here. Now it's scrolling away from me. Working on Star Trek The Next Generation, including Booby Trap and Face of the Enemy, both ranking best among the series, as well as Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Voyager. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Since you said that and I Googled her, I just wanted to interject that in there because that's neat that she has worked on. It didn't list Remington Steele as being the groundbreaking shows, but, whatever, we'll forgive them.
Oh, well, in that case, the article's trash.
Exactly. All right. Sorry. I just wanted to kind of interject that because it's kind of cool. Anyway.
Oh, one piece of business I should have said it earlier and didn't. We received a fan mail, which is a text-based message. So we don't know who this came from, but you'll know who you are. Reminding me that I blew it. Back in season 3, episode 1, we had talked about the season order. And I had said, well, you know what? We're going to create a document and make it available and put it in the show notes. And guess who didn't do what they were supposed to do? So I'm working on it now. And by the time you hear this episode, it should be out there and available. I will add the link back in the season 3, episode 1 show notes so that you can get to it from the Google Drive, or if you are in the Facebook group, I will upload it there. Anyway, now that my public humiliation has been completed, let's get on to and documented. Yes, let's get on to the episode. I like this episode beginning because it's not brilliant in the sense of nobody would have ever thought of that. How did this guy do this? But it's great in that it's well conceived and well done for what it's supposed to be.
I only have one tiny eensy little nitpick.
Sure.
Yeah, I gotta do this because I had a friend who was obsessed with pens, like different types of fountain pens and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And this pen would not work for what he's doing. It wouldn't have been used in the 80s, first of all, at all, this type of pen that he's using. I have a whole link on pens because if I recall correctly, the pen he's got is like one of those fountain pens, correct?
Well, it uses an ink from an inkwell, so it's the old style.
Yeah, that's my issue with it because like those inkwell pens would blot all the time, and they would not be something that you would want to use for like fine detail comic book work. I Googled what they use to write, like to ink the comics, and yeah, it wouldn't have been used in the 80s. They would be using something different. So,
but we see it. It's happening. It's right there on the screen. If it's blotting, that's because you don't know how to use it.
No, it's not. But it does say here, I'm just looking to see where they would have used like fine tip pens, not those. I had a link here. I had a link. But yeah, so it kind of drove me crazy because like you see him dipping it and I'm like, no, that would have blotted everywhere. It would have been terrible. So that is my only eensy-weensy nitpick.
Okay, here's a question though. Is this the type of pen that would have been used back in, let's say, the 30s or 40s when doing this style of art? Not necessarily comics, but this style of art.
Not according to this website.
Okay.
Here's a fun fact. Okay, so I'm trying to find I'm scrolling right now, and I probably should have pre-found this before we started, but we were worried about other things. But
sure.
I don't know if people know this, but do you know why we use cursive writing, like at all?
To confuse people who don't understand it.
I would say that, but I would agree with you on that, but no. Actually, the need for cursive writing has been sort of eliminated decades and decades and decades ago. And it's not computers, as people think. People think, oh, nobody uses cursive anymore because of computers. It has nothing to do with that. The use of cursive writing was entirely down to the pens. So those inkwell pens that blot, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reason why people wrote in cursive was so that you didn't have to lift the pen, because putting the pen down on the paper is what caused the blotting of the ink. So the more the letters were joined, the less you have to lift the pen and the less like splotches of ink that you had. Once the ballpoint pen was invented, that basically eliminated the need for cursive writing because it essentially gave us a pen that you didn't have to constantly worry about the splotching of the ink. So like that is technically the reason why we used cursive writing to begin with. this website that I found basically talked about the different types of pens when writing with, or when inking comic books, and the nibs and things like that were the tips that they would use to put on pens, right? So it says, while some artists were creating political cartoons and other drawings for magazines and newspapers, the precision of steel pen nibs, those are the ones that like kind of stick on that you don't have to dip, gave birth to a new art form, penmanship. Practitioners like Daniel T. Ames created amazingly ornate official presentation documents and drawings, and artistic penmanship was taught in schools. A good penman could find work doing anything from wedding invitations to diplomas to stock certificates. Diplomas, yeah, that's what you get when you graduate weight.
From collage.
So these are still the ones that like attach, right?
Okay.
Then in 1914, penman Ross F. George showed a cardmaster, William Hugh Gordon, a type of steel pen nib with a second piece of lighter metal attached to the top, creating a larger ink reservoir that allowed the user to produce more lettering before redipping the pen. So these are still the ones that you dip. This you could also be filled with the ink bottle dropper for more precise and less messy fill. Though it was soon imitated by other companies, the Gordon and Ross pens, marketed first under the Speedball name and produced by the C. Howard Hunt Manufacturing Company of Camden, New Jersey, soon became the leading seller of lettering pens for show card and calligraphy work. And by the early 1920s, they were making them in 5 basic styles: square tip, round tip, wedge tip, over tip, and larger brush wedge tips. They can all come in a variety of sizes. So then these basically were kind of modified and changed to the point where by the 1950s, 1940s-ish, they didn't need to dip them at all, right? So,
okay.
And then by the 1960s, it says the other lettering instruments I've used even more than nib pens are technical drawing pens. They came into wide use in the 60s, first for architectural drawings and drafting. They work through capillary action and gravity. Ink is pulled from the reservoir through the point and down a narrow tube to the tip, helped by a thin wire and a weight on the end. Shaking the pen up and down gently moves the wire through the tube, encouraging the flow. At least that's the theory. Comic artists and letterers soon began using them too. They have pros and cons compared to nib pens. On the pro side, a reservoir filled with ink can last through several days of constant use, and it's a cleaner tool than a dip pen. Only the writing tip has any exposed ink. So, yeah, he would not be using this pen. This is where I'm going with this. The bottom line, that is the wrong pen, and it bugged me. The end. I'm done.
Now that we're done with our history lesson, let's get.
I had a friend that collected these pens, right? So I've seen, and they're expensive. They're not cheap to buy these old school ink dip pens. So yeah, I was watching him ink, and I'm like, you wouldn't use that pen. What do you think? That I don't know these things? And then I realized, oh yeah, probably most, because it looks all fancy and stuff. So people probably, but yeah, that pen would make inking that comic extremely messy.
Well, right, anyway,
continue on.
The episode begins.
Sorry.
The episode begins showing the hands of a drawing being created. We see the pen, the paper, the hands of the creator, but nothing of the creator beyond that. The scene that's being illustrated is of a car driving down a winding mountain road at night. And then as the details of the drawing are added in and filled in, we cut to the scene of a real car screaming down the mountainside of a winding road, or the winding road of a mountainside at night. And we cut back to the drawing being created. We see it's from the inside view of the car, the driver's perspective. The road takes a sudden curve ahead, and immediately in front of the car is a warning barricade with the sign attached reading danger. And we cut back to the real scene, again, from the driver's perspective, mirroring what we saw in the drawing. We return to the artist's drawing, which is the scene of a car with the driver tumbling out. And then we see that actually happen with the real car. And then the car crashes through the safety barrier in the drawing down a cliff, which again is mirrored by the action of the real car. Final frame of the drawing, the car explodes. And then we see the real car explodes. It's almost like a voodoo doll scenario. You know, whatever happens here happens there.
It's quite cool. You're right. It is a neat sequence because it also gives us a good chunk of what the plot is going to be in those 15 seconds or something like that, because we can see that whatever is being drawn is what is actually happening in real life. So that sets up the mystery of whoever is the victim is going to be suffering from this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. I just see comments. I'm seeing comments. Yay!
Yes, I was going to say, we got a comment from
so
go ahead.
Yes, there was a whole old school vibe that they were going for. I completely agree. It was very much a 1940s, 1950s film noir sort of feel.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and like I said, the whole other than your complaint, you're the only one that complained. But other than that, it was a great sequence.
The pen that they are supposed to use, and that's not the right pen, but it's fine. It's fine. It looks cool. I will agree. It looks cool.
It looks cool. Anyway, next we're at the agency. Laura and Mildred are hauling stacks of loaded file folders into an office, which is already overflowing with loaded file folders. And I'm guessing this is Murphy's old office. I don't know, but
yeah, it's got to be.
Yeah.
It's got to be. Yeah.
Anyway, Mildred comments that the place is starting to look like beacons on a bad day.
I didn't get this reference. Do you get this reference? I tried Googling.
Moving company. Beacons.
Okay.
Moving company.
Okay. This must be before my time. Well, not before my time, but before my time of being able to remember my time, because I don't know what beacons is. Or is it American? Is it American thing? Because maybe I just don't know it.
I think it's an American company. I don't know. They may service other, like Canada, something like that. And I will note that the transcript that is available on the,
I'm spelling it wrong. That's part of the reason.
Website. Yeah. I was going to say that was done as a transcription from the audio, and they may not have been aware of Beacons Moving and Storage, which is Bekins.
Yeah, I was spelling it Beacons, but now that I've Googled it, I've got the it does exist in Canada, or at least it did. So yeah, I've just never heard of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, yes, Mildred says it's starting to look like beacons on a bad day, then asks Laura to let her put all that information on the computer. And Laura flatly rejects the idea. She will not have the agency's history condensed on a single floppy disk all it takes is someone.
A single floppy disk? Oh, Laura, my sweet summer child. That many file folders. It's going to take you more than a single floppy disk.
Well, now you are speaking as a youngster. Back in the day, we had floppy disks that would hold, let's see, what was it? 1.2, 3, 4, it was a 3.5-inch floppy. It would hold, oh, man, it's been so long, I don't remember. Anyway, when you consider that back during this time, there was no windows, there were no fonts, there were no, fancy documents. It was all text. And a simple text document does not take up that much space on a disk. They would also have probably put it into a database, which, though it would take up more space on the disk, would still be all text space. And the characters are only, like 8 bytes or 8 bits in length. So you can put a whole lot of data on a floppy disk. But also, they had hard disks, which not nearly as large as the hard drives that we've got now. But if you had let's see, this was 1985. I got my first. Yeah, so you would have had maybe a 20 megabyte hard drive in the computer. That would hold a lot of data.
I would like everybody to note my.
You're bored, I know.
No. My reservation in making jokes about hard and floppy disks, especially 3.5-inch floppies and hard disks. So I'd just like to point out that I did that. I managed
amazing
to
restraint on your part.
Amazing
restraint.
My restraint. But also, I had bags and bags of floppy, like the old, like the little squares, the save button, as most people know it, and even still, like. The amount of file folders I see there, like the amount of, I'm sorry, but it would be more than one. It would be more than one.
Well, it would on a floppy disk, but if it was a hard drive, then, like I said, at this time, you would have commonly had a 20 megabyte hard drive. That would have held a lot of data. So you'd be surprised how much.
She's Giles here too. She's Gilesing. For the Buffy reference, Giles doesn't like computers, but yeah, she's Gilesing. She is. She's refusing to get with the times.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's possible to she may have to. Yeah, you're right. Depending on how much they were putting into the records on the database, they might have to use multiple disks. But I mean, it's
a smart thing
doable.
to do. Yeah, and a smart thing to do would be to have them on the disks as well as keep the file folders for at least as long as, because what is the reason for keeping them? Is that in case they get audited or something like that? Like how long would they need to have them?
There's probably legal requirements. I don't know what those would be, but they would probably have legal requirements that they need to comply with. Plus, just simply the fact that if sometime in the future some issue comes up with regard to a case that they investigated, like maybe somebody decides, well, we're going to sue you because we can. They would need to necessarily go back and get some of those records to document their activities. And then there's just the fact that some people never get rid of anything.
This is true, but the reason why I say that is because I know that by law you're told you should keep your tax returns for a certain number of years, or at least here in Canada we're supposed to keep them for a certain number of years, and then after that you're fine. But like, I would think something like this, she could be theoretically, it might be better to say put them on a computer, the ones that are the oldest, right? The ones that maybe the likelihood of needing or referring back to is the lowest.
Right.
Those ones you'd want to save space, put them on the computer. I mean, if something happens and you lose them, that sucks. But like, the likely, you triage it, because eventually they are going to run out of office space to hold all the file folders. And then what do you do? Right. So,
right. And then, the other thing is that Laura says that, she's not going to have the agency's history condensed to a single floppy disk. As you pointed out, it might take a few more than that, where all it takes is somebody to hit a wrong button. And as she puts it, gives a whole new meaning to the phrase gone in 60 seconds.
She's making a movie reference.
She's making a movie reference. But what she's also displaying is a lack of experience with computers, because you don't make one copy.
No, you make backups.
You make multiple copies, and you keep one copy off-site, so that if something happens to your office, your home, whatever, you got another copy somewhere else that is not very likely to be damaged. But don't
pin it to the fridge with a magnet.
Well, that's true. But in all fairness to Laura, back in this era, 1980s.
Back in the day, yeah.
Backups and backup plans, they were not given a whole lot of consideration. So, she's understandably concerned, but it's due to a lack of her experience, I think, with computers. Yeah. But anyway, she mulls that really all they need is just more room, someplace that's not being used. And of course, she focuses her attention on the door to Steele's office. And then
to be fair, the man still doesn't have pencils. As far as offices go, and I understand why that office is kept so like clean and pristine looking. It's because that's where they see the clients, and it looks all nice and orderly and whatever. And if they started shoving file folders in there and it started looking like Laura's office, clients might not have the same level of confidence in them when they walk through the door. But so, he is using up a lot of space.
Yes. Well, and Laura calls it wasted space. Mildred, realizing what Laura has in mind, tries to block access to Steele's office on the grounds that the boss left strict orders not to be disturbed. And Laura,
which usually means he's doing nothing.
Right. Well, and Laura says, well, no, she'll take full responsibility, sidesteps Mildred, opens the door and steps into his office. And then we see him at his desk, laughing out loud, his face and figure hidden behind the open pages of the Sunday comics.
Yep.
Laura swings the door of the office closed with a slightly too firm motion. It doesn't quite slam shut, but it's definitely I'm getting your attention close.
She's definitely meaning to be noticed. Yep.
And of course, Mildred peers around Laura, giving Steele a I really tried look. Well,
Yeah.
Laura begins to slowly march toward the desk, and Steele lowers the comics section, huge grin on his face, and he greets her and quickly goes back to his comics until the sound of Laura loudly banging a stack of file folders on his desk prompts him to look up again. And misunderstanding, he reaches into his jacket pocket for a pen, presuming she's there for signatures. But no, they're running out of room for all their old case files. And, since his desk is empty and not being used for anything important.
Ever.
Okay.
Literally ever.
Right. Yeah. I'm a little confused here, though. Are Mildred and Laura just doing some, say, reorganization? They just need a temporary landing pad for some of the files. Or are they talking about they're running out of room for permanent storage, as you kind of alluded to earlier?
I think they're running out of room for permanent storage because there's not a lot of physical space in that office. And we've seen that office, that where she stores the files. It's not very big.
Yeah. And I agree with you. That does seem to be what it is, especially in light of Mildred's suggestion that they computerize all the files. But if that's the case, Steele's desk is hardly a long-term solution.
No, it definitely wouldn't be a long-term solution. I'm thinking she just wants somewhere to put the stuff until they figure out what they're going to do with it. Because, his drawers, like the ones... realize how that started to sound as I said it. His desk drawers, you pervert, are not that large. Or deep. Like they're regular desk drawers. So I don't know where you. Shut up.
Anyway, Steele's response is just simply to smile, tell her to carry on, and then he goes back to his funny papers. As Laura rolls her eyes, she walks around the desk, peers over over Steele's shoulders, looks at the comic that he finds so amusing, and with a verbal eye roll says, "The blaster, I might have known." Steele responds that it's wonderful and flattering for them to be immortalized in such a popularized art form, as we see the title panel, which reads, "The Blaster" by Raymond Kelly, and a second panel featuring a comic version of Steele, and in the background, a figure that vaguely resembles Laura, but with virtually no facial detail to define the appearance, and white, empty circles for eyes.
Unnamed woman.
That's right, unidentified woman. Laura laughs, dismissing the idea of Dashing Dave being Steele, which is the character that's being shown. Steele says, well, she can't possibly deny the obvious resemblance of Dashing Dave's granite jaw, the luxuriant black hair, the steely blue eyes. To himself, he suggests that the artist has also captured Laura quite well. It's like, ouch. Laura, dollface? I mean, she's horrified, calling the character an ill-defined blob, a ditz with Orphan Annie eyes.
The hair is similar.
That's about it. That's about it. Anyway, Steele tries to walk back his comment, suggesting that what he was talking about was the character's hair, claiming that the hair has a certain similarities to Laura, as you just pointed out. Only somewhat interested, Laura asks what they, the they being Dollface and Dashing Dave. I'm sorry, it just escaped me there as a brain fart. What they're up to these days. And of course, we see several frames of the comic in progression as Steele explains that Dashing Dave and Dollface are awaiting the arrival of Dick Darkside, who has just double-crossed the Blaster. And as a result, the Blaster has cut Dick's brake cable. And as we come to the last frame of the comic where we see Dick Darkside's character saying, "Someone's trying to kill me," we hear a voice out of frame say, "Someone's trying to kill me."
This is good. This is visually, this is really well done. Mm-hmm. I think how they have the voice, and then he kind of pulls it down, and there he is.
Yeah. And not meaning to dive into spoilers here, but it's it's great that this comic actually reflects what's going on in terms of Artie being Dick Darkside, double crossing the Blaster. I mean, it's just great.
Yeah,
it's just,
actually, it is. It's rather
Anyway,
clever.
Steele lowers the comic page, and Steele and Laura both look at the source of the spoken statement in somewhat shocked amazement, because there he is, Dick Darkside in the flesh. And the man says, no, he's Arthur Wayne. Bruce Wayne? He inks the blaster. Yeah. Laura continues to look at Artie, mouth open, apparently unable to think of anything to say. Steele looks down at the comic, then back at Artie, then to Laura. And then Steele looks past Artie to the office door. I mean, is he looking to see where Mildred is, and how Artie got into the office, or is
maybe.
Or is he, is this a joke? Is this, candid camera? What's going on here? And then he looks back at Artie and questions, you said someone's trying to kill you. Artie begins to explain that 2 weeks earlier, the character of Dick Darkside was put into the blaster strip, and just for fun, he kind of filled in his features to look like himself. But ever since then, whatever happens to Dick Darkside happens to himself. And when Laura asks him to elaborate, he continues, saying that Dick Darkside was chased by killer Dobermans. The next day, a dog came up at him like Cujo. Oh, there's another movie reference.
There's a second movie reference,
yeah. I forgot to throw that into my notes. Now fixed, yes.
Gone in 60 seconds, Cujo, those are two so far.
I got 60 seconds. I missed the Cujo. But, he says things like that happen. And when Dick Darkside was nearly run down by a hitman, well, the next day a car ran a red light and almost hit him, but he dismissed it as just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But then yesterday, in a replay of the comic that Steele had just been reading about a car racing down a hill and flying off a cliff, Artie's brake line was cut. And from the second he had started down Malibu Canyon, he didn't have any brakes, and he managed to jump out only just before. And Steele interrupts to clarify. Is Artie saying that someone who is reading the strips could be making these attempts on his life? And Artie leans back and grimly admits that it really doesn't narrow the possibilities down too much, does it? Has anybody been threatening Artie? No. Maybe somebody might be holding a grudge? No. Anyone who dislikes him, even a teensy bit? Well, Artie hesitates and then reluctantly says, well, he hates the idea of getting anyone in trouble.
So Artie is a confusing character for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and a little bit. Because I know that the twist at the end is, of course, he's being manipulated by Cindy. Spoiler alert. But he comes across as so naive to the point of almost being childlike that I wonder how much of, obviously he was willing to kill to get what he wants. So there is an element of him that is, I don't know if evil's the right word, but not a nice guy. But how much of that is him being twisted and manipulated by Cindy? And how much of that is who Artie is? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I think his naivete is somewhat an act.
Oh, for sure, because he obviously knows that Ray hates him. He has to.
Well, yeah, because he's created the situation for Ray to hate him.
Yeah.
So his naivete is somewhat of an act, but I think it's also, we find out toward the end of the episode that he's a spoiled little brat, and he acts like a spoiled little brat. And I think the spoiled little brat part of him imagines that this is how it should be. This is how I want it. So that's how it should be. And I don't understand why I'm not getting my way. And so I think there's a little bit of genuine, I think some of his naivete is genuine in the sense that he thinks he's entitled to all this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
And he doesn't understand why he's not getting it. And everybody's out to get him. And maybe a little bit of paranoia. I mean, obviously the guy's not all there together, because you can't be to kill somebody, just because they did something. But
no, that's why I said. But I'm wondering if there's a personality disorder in there too, right? Like something that is, because he doesn't come across as somebody who is. We've seen characters on this show that are sociopathic and evil, right? We've seen Mrs. Armadale, for example, kill them, Willard, kill them all, kill them, and kill them too. Descoin, she genuinely enjoys. It seems to me for Artie, it's less about killing somebody and more about just, well, this is something in my way. And so if I move them out of the way, then I get what I want. And that he's not even seeing them as human beings, which I don't know if that, and I'm not saying this is well done in terms of like, if it were something like a character who is neurodivergent or something like that. I just wonder, and it's certainly not an excuse. You kill somebody, Artie has the wherewithal to understand the consequences of that. He's not, you couldn't plead insanity or something like that. He knows what he's doing is against the law and wrong. But I just wonder if there's some other, because his character just seems oddly childlike in that what you said as well, with when it doesn't go his way, he's like, he acts like a little kid that just got his toy taken away. But it doesn't feel like it's him being adult about it. It feels like he's having a meltdown.
Yeah, lack of maturity. Lack of maturity. Entitled. That's just him. He thinks he's entitled to something, and as you said, people are in his way, and he's got to deal with them somehow. And if the strip's got to, as we find out later, if the strip's got to die in order for his strip to get picked up, and Raymond Kelly isn't going to kill the strip on its own, well, then you have to get rid of Raymond Kelly. In his mind, it makes sense. Although I don't, like you say, I don't think he's, I don't really think he's crazy.
No, I don't mean crazy. There could be some sort of like, not crazy, because crazy means like you don't understand the consequences of your actions. Right. He understands the consequences of his actions.
But he just simply, he wants to get what he wants, and he doesn't care what he has to do to achieve it. And to him, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, and I think I don't know. I think Cindy's driving a lot of this bus.
Oh, sure.
I'm saying. Like I don't think that Artie is incapable of it without her. But I don't think it was his idea either. I think it was her kind of like, hey, it would work if we did this and this, and then when it doesn't, so. Yeah, they're both not very nice people.
No, they're not. Although they seem like nice people,
Yeah,
their mothers like them, so they've got to be nice people, right? Anyway, when Steele asks if anyone, or Laura asks if anybody, dislikes him even just a teensy weensy bit, Artie hesitates, says he doesn't want to get anybody in trouble, and Steele says, "Artie, someone's trying to kill you." Okay, well, there are a couple of people, and that might, hate him. He's got the act down good. Anyway, then we cut to a tall, bespectacled blonde man. We cut to a tall, bespectacled blonde man. I kept wanting to say bald man. I don't know why. Standing in front of a wall of posters featuring various comics and movie characters. And the man, Paul Steuben, specifically by name, is astounded. And he says, "Hate him? What's the hate? Artie's one of the nicest guys I know." Steele responds that, according to Artie at least, the two men had a rather large disagreement. Steele hesitates on the word. Obviously, he's trying to downplay the referenced altercation, suggesting that Artie considered it to be more substantial. But it had happened a couple weeks earlier. The two men haven't spoken since. Steuben tells Steele that it's his job to have disagreements with people like Artie. He supervises production on half a dozen comic strips for Allied Press Syndicate, and it's up to him to make sure the stories and the drawings are up to snuff. And Steele takes this to mean that Steuben's just saying that he didn't think Artie's work was satisfactory. Steuben says, no, that wasn't the problem. Artie's work was perfect, but Raymond Kelly, the man who writes the blaster, asks Steuben to lean on Artie to keep him humble. Steele's perplexed. Is that a common occurrence between artist and inker? And Steuben hesitates and then sighs and says, no, but there's nothing common about Raymond Kelly. He says about 3 years earlier, the syndicate was going to drop the blaster because no one was reading it. Then Kelly hired Artie to ink. Suddenly, the drawings were jumping off the page. The whole style changed, and Artie saved the strip. Steele quietly muses that surely Kelly would have been indebted to Artie. Well, Steuben agrees, but then says that, on the contrary, Kelly's ego wouldn't allow for gratitude. So Kelly was resentful. And Steuben's assessment is that Kelly is the sort of person who would just as soon kill someone as share the credit with them.
You sort of can't blame Kelly for feeling how he's feeling. Like if the comic was about to die, and then they got this other artist to come in and draw and ink the comic, and then suddenly it's popular again, that would imply to Kelly at least that his contribution was never as significant as the art, which, to be fair, comics are a visual form. Graphic novels and whatnot are primarily a visual format. So that actually kind of makes sense. Not to say that the dialogue and the story isn't important as well, but if the comic was dying off and the only thing that was changed was the visual style of it, and then suddenly it's wildly popular again, that implies that with or without Raymond Kelly, Artie was the sort of savior, and that would suck to be Kelly.
Well, if you think about a comic strip like, let's say, Batman, if you drew it in the style of a Disney cartoon, Daffy Duck, Uncle Scrooge, whatever, Mickey Mouse, it wouldn't work. No. Even using the same stories.
Exactly.
So in comics, the visuals are a very, very important aspect of it. But yeah, I mean, I can.
And you have
to
wonder who was drawing it before, because it implies it wasn't Kelly, or at least if it was, why he allowed somebody else to ink it is curious.
Yeah, it doesn't really say, because it could have been Kelly or it could have been someone else.
Yeah,
and that other person quit, retired, whatever. But it's interesting, because one of the things I was thinking is that I don't know a lot about how comic strips are done. I think comic strips are a little bit different than comic books. I can see where in a comic book you're going to have a team. One guy does the rough drawings, another guy does this element, another person does that element. I don't know if that same approach applies to comic strips, or if it applies to some comic strips but not others. I guess it depends on the particular artist and writer of the strip.
I'm not entirely sure, because most of the time when you see like paper strips, it's just one name there, right? And this is true too, because it just says Raymond Kelly. It doesn't say Raymond Kelly and Artie Wayne on the strip.
Right.
But I also wonder about the story. I also wonder about the storyline a little bit, because it seems like if it's in the paper, oftentimes comic strips in the paper are like 3 panels, right? So we're getting like big story changes happening somehow in 3 panels or less than 3 panels. Like you've got to wonder how day to day there's all these wacky stuff going on, and it seems like wild, intricate plot lines, but like you only get 3 panels, so.
Well, I'm trying to think. Not
to mention, Steele was giggling to himself in the office, and it doesn't seem like a particularly humorous strip.
Well, no, but I think he may have been giggling more at the illustrations of himself and Laura. But I'm trying to think back, because I think on daily strips, some of them were 3, some of them were 4, some, particularly under the Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes approach, Bill Watterson just threw out the entire rule book. And that started, his strip started in the early to mid 80s. So there were artists out there who were just basically saying, the syndicate in the newspapers would say, well, we want a 3-panel or a 4-panel comic strip. And artists like Watterson were saying, no, I'm going to do it the way I'm doing it, and you can either like it or get lost.
I also wonder how they would know the popularity of a single comic strip, because with TV and stuff like that, you've got ratings. With newspapers, circulation can drop for a number of reasons, not nearly limited to whatever the comic strip is. So I wonder how they determined this is what people are looking for when they pick up the paper.
I don't know. I would say one criteria, certainly not the only criteria, I'm sure, but one criteria is how many papers is it appearing in? Because if you got a strip appearing in 100 newspapers, and then you've got another strip that's only appearing in 10 newspapers, there's a presumption there that the strip that's appearing in 100 newspapers is more popular because those papers sought out having that strip in them. And
True.
so that's,
Fair
I would
enough.
say that's one indicator. They may also just, most of these comic strips are distributed by a couple of newspaper comic syndicates. So they're like these large agencies that have dozens of comic strips. And I would imagine that they also get fan mail to themselves, and they can, because it's one agency.
Yeah, that's true. They probably have people writing in.
Yeah, this strip gets a lot of fan mail. This one doesn't so much, and they're in about the same number of papers. So I'm sure they've got a number of different tools.
True.
Anyway, back into the episode. Where were we here? Yes, Kelly's not the kind of person who would like to share credit. He would just as soon kill somebody. Well, Steele has what he needs. He thanks Steuben for the information and his insights, gets up to leave. But Steuben rises and stops Steele, wondering if anyone has ever told him that he looks an awful lot like Dashing Dave. And then, of course, a kind of a knowing, secretive grin crosses Steele's face. But then, as if he isn't pleased that somebody's noticed that fact, he acts as if he's unaware of the resemblance and doesn't even bother, reading the comics. I mean, after all, it's just comics. And he comments that, he'll have to look at it sometime.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Well, we cut to a close-up shot of Laura slowly and emphatically stating, "No, I am not Dollface." And we see that Laura's talking to a young blonde in what is clearly an artist's studio. So, you get the impression that Dollface and Laura look enough alike that some random person just recognizes them. Of course, we find out later that's not the case.
Which has got to piss Laura off even more because she's so often an unnamed woman. And the only time she does get recognized is for Dollface, who has literally no facial features to speak of.
Yeah.
It's gotta hurt.
Well, it turns out that the young woman is named Cindy Dirks. She apologizes and saying that, she assumed that, since she knew that Artie had modeled Dashing Dave after Mr. Steele, she must be Dollface.
Have you noticed the omnipresence of D names here? We've got Cindy Dirks, Dick Darkside, Dashing Dave. There's a lot of D names here. It's just Dollface.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hadn't noticed that, but you're right.
Yeah, it's very alliterative. I wonder if it was intentional.
Somebody apparently thinks the number or the letter D in names, the first letter, is somehow a great. There was a TV show or something. I don't remember what it was now, but it's somebody saying that it was two comics talking. And a certain number wasn't funny, but this other number was funny. And the first guy says, "Well, prove it." And so he goes to turns to his friend and says, just says the number, and the friend starts laughing. I think that may be what somebody's doing here with the D's. They think D is a great letter, great sound. Anyway,
could be. Yeah.
Laura directs the conversation back to Cindy's feelings about Artie, and Cindy shyly says that she loves Artie. And Laura is surprised, saying that Artie thinks she hates him. Cindy shakes her head and says, "No, she could never hate Artie. In fact, she doesn't think there's a woman who could. He's so open and so caring and so..." And she trails off, and Laura finishes by adding, "independent." Cindy shrugs, saying, "Well, that's probably why it didn't work out. She was suffocating him, as women seem to do to Artie."
This is going to sound terrible, but
okay.
I like her better as a character as a murderer, because if she's not a calculating, cold-blooded killer, then she's coming off as kind of a pathetic doormat. And don't get me wrong, I don't want anyone to be a cold-blooded killer either, but
You got a problem with pathetic doormats. That's all.
Well, I do actually. At least with a cold-blooded killer, you know what to do with them, right? Shove them in a jail cell and throw away the key. Whereas just this whole act of, oh, well, I was suffocating him by wanting to be with him. So naturally he had to dump me and find somebody else, but it's okay. I still love him. You just want to punch her. Roll her up in a carpet and toss her off a cliff or, I don't know, something.
Oh, wait a second. What did you just get done saying about you don't want anybody to be murderers? And then you go and describe. That's your solution is murder her.
Turn this around on me. Okay, fine.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, Cindy continues saying that there's something about Artie that makes women just want to mother him.
Yeah.
And Laura says that she can see that, although she's pretty insincere about it. And then she asks if Cindy knows of any other women who would have granted Artie his freedom, maybe someone less understanding than herself. And somewhat embarrassed, Cindy responds, Mrs. Kelly. And Laura, not immediately connecting the dots, asks who Mrs. Kelly is. Oh, Mrs. Raymond Kelly, Cindy supplies, the wife of the man who draws the blaster. And Laura's shocked, but Cindy rushes to defend Artie, saying it's not his fault. Mrs. Kelly seduced him, and she has a Mrs. Robinson complex.
Okay. No. No, it takes two. It takes two, my friend. It takes two. And I realize this is, again,
the
part of the whole...
seducer and the seducee.
Yeah, but I know she's trying to manipulate Laura, too, with this whole innocent, like, it's not his fault, blah, blah, blah. But, like, if this was your excuse, he couldn't help himself. He did. She came on. What are you going to do? Not sleep with her? Yes, that's what you do. You don't sleep with a married. You have free will. I hate that excuse. I really hate. They seduced you. Okay, but you don't have to seduce back or be seduced or whatever the verb is there. I don't know.
Anyway, so nuts. So we have an indirect reference to the movie The Graduate. So
we've got 3 now.
Notes. Yes. So Laura wonders if maybe Mrs. Kelly is holding a grudge against Artie. And Cindy says, well, she doesn't think so. She died, about 3 months earlier. Laura asks if Raymond Kelly ever found out about his wife's affair. Cindy says, well, he didn't, but then pleads with Laura not to ever tell Raymond, because if he ever found out, and we have a hard cut to Laura and Steele.
Kill Artie? Sorry.
Yeah, with Laura completing Cindy's statement, he'd kill Artie.
And again, like, I mean, this episode has a cool twist, i.e. that Raymond Kelly he's the victim. He's not the person responsible. But, like, when you think of all the stuff that's stacking up for poor Raymond Kelly, you do feel bad for the guy. Because he's not only looking at his strip having been saved by somebody else and sort of that realization that maybe his own contributions were not enough to keep the strip alive, but also the fact that his wife is sleeping with the guy that did it. Like, I mean, it seems like he didn't know about it, but oof.
Yeah.
Oof.
I mean, it's not looking good for you, Ray. Not looking good.
No, it's not.
Okay, so anyway, Steele suggests that they need to ask Artie some questions about the man behind the blaster. And after they get the address from Mildred via the phone in the car, Laura tells Mildred, thank you, starts to put the phone down, and then obviously heard Mildred add some additional information. And that additional information is to pass a message on to Mr. Steele.
Yeah,
Aspen has just received, yep.
Vacation attempt number, what is this, 4?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that since the thaw, like we're...
Yep. And more manipulation by Steele. Aspen has just received 5 inches of fresh powder over an 8-foot packed base.
I gotta say, this is not that smart on his part, because all of his other vacation destinations involve less clothing. He wants to take her to somewhere where you got to wear layers. It's gonna be harder to,
Of course, if she gets cold enough, you'll have to warm her up.
I guess so, but I'm just saying, in general, there's going to be a lot of bulky, padded clothing on.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So
anyway, Steele grins at the news, and then after a moment says, really, trying to seem as if he's distracted and disinterested. And, I have no idea why Mildred would have passed that information along to me.
Yeah.
And there's a somewhat awkward silence. And then Laura casually comments that she didn't know Mr. Steele skied. And as if trying not to make it seem like it's a big deal, while trying simultaneously to make it seem like he's not trying to make it seem like a big deal, Steele passively says, well, an occasional shush down the Alps with Jean-Claude.
Who's Jean-Claude? Is there a man in Mr. Steele's life that we don't know about? That sounds like a romantic. Jean-Claude and I like to get away.
Jean-Claude Keeley. He was according to Encyclopedia Britannica.
It's a person. Oh, it's an actual person. Oh,
yes. He was a dominant figure in men's international alpine skiing competitions from 1965 through 1968, and was a popular sports personage known for his irreverent behavior, which kind of puts him in the same league as Steele. In 66 to 67, he won every downhill race he entered.
Wow.
And earned the first World's Cup for men awarded by the Fédération Internationale de Ski for finishing among the leaders most consistently in a series of international races.
Is he from France? I'm assuming he's French, right?
Yes. Yeah. In 67, in 66, 67, 68, he repeated his World Cup triumph, led the French skiing teams to the World Championships in 68 Winter Olympics. At Grenoble, France, he won gold medals for the downhill, slalom, and giant slalom races for men, becoming the second skier in Olympic history to sweep the alpine events. The first was Tony Saylor of Austria in 1956.
I thought this was just a name that Steele pulled out of his butt. So I am amused to know that this was an actual person, because now that I take back everything I said. He's not trying to I thought he was trying to make her jealous in some way. And I thought, why would he choose an exotic man's name? Why not pick Tiffany and I like to hit the slopes, but now that I know this is an actual skier, that makes more sense.
And then after his retirement from competitive skiing in 68, Keeley engaged in a number of activities, including acting and auto racing, but then he returned to skiing in 1972 as a professional and became a world champion professional skier. This is obviously a lie as well, like playing polo with Prince Charles, right? With Charlie,
he's clearly making this up. Okay, got it.
But it's a real person, so
I didn't realize
and it's a real person you probably couldn't get in contact with because they got so many people blocking you.
Yeah,
so you couldn't confirm or deny or prove Steele was a liar, So it's a safe lie, I guess.
It's clever. That is clever, I have to say.
Well, there's another awkward pause in the conversation, and then Laura comments that, she was a junior downhill champ when she was 10, which is a fairly obvious attempt at dropping a subtle hint that she'd like to be invited to join him on a ski trip.
Laura, she's Laura, you're better than this, Laura.
Laura. She just walked right into it. This was obviously bait. This was obviously bait. And she walked right into it.
She's smarter than this. Hey, I'm not saying don't go. This is what drives me nuts between these two. They can't just go somewhere together. It's got to be sorry. Somebody in our comments just said, I always thought it was Van Damme. I don't know why. Some action movie, maybe. That would be hilarious if he's hanging out with Jean-Claude Van Damme. That would be chef's kiss. Perfect. I can see that. I can see that buddy cop team up, and I want in. But this is the problem with these two. He's always got to try to manipulate her into some situation.
Yes.
And it's this back and forth. Why not just say, hey, I'm thinking of going skiing this weekend. Do you want to come? Yes or no? Why? And then Laura, she's just walking right in. She knows this has to be something she knows is Laura, you're better than this. Sorry.
Well, and then Steele, it's like pulling the little string to get the carrot a little bit farther away from you, knowing that you're going to follow it, because he gives a non-committal grunt and then tells her that, well, he'd love to invite her, but he couldn't bear the disappointment. And Laura, thinking he's commenting on her skiing ability, asks why he thinks he would be disappointed. Well, Steele points out that every time they've planned for a few uninterrupted moments together, a case interferes. And we talked about this in the last episode. And Laura is offended at the intimation that she doesn't know how to have fun. But Steele didn't mean that she doesn't know how to have fun, but that she won't let herself have fun, saying that her idea of a vacation is coming back late from lunch. And
we've got a comment as well that says, Laura always struck me as easily distracted / focused on cases and not catching things on a personal level because she's had to be business-minded for so long that mixing business and pleasure is like a problem. And yeah, I can see that too, because it's hard for her to switch gears. When she's in work mode, she's in work mode. And when she's not, it's hard for her to kind of like put that aside. But this is, and again, the comment adding it's sort of spectrum behavior, super focused and hard to divert. I agree with that. Or ADHD in similar senses, when we're hyper focused on something, we can't just change over or switch. That's just very difficult for us. And Laura definitely has traits of that. And it bothers me that it always bothers me when he tries to manipulate her in any way, because if you want to spend time with someone, then just ask. And honestly, if he just asked for a dinner that night, it'd be a hell of a lot easier to arrange than trips to Fiji or Rio de Janeiro or Aspen or wherever it is that he's trying to get her to go, right? But even still, even if that's being difficult in the past to arrange, like doing this bit where he's manipulating her constantly or making her this is again that negging behavior that I told you about, where he's like, well, I'd love to invite you, but you've let me down before, essentially kind of like implying that she doesn't know how to, and she, he doesn't say that, but as you pointed out, she's like, are you saying I don't know how to have fun? I'm not saying that, but like it doesn't happen very much. I don't know. You do the math here. You draw the conclusion.
Those aren't the words I used. Right? Like, that's what I said means, but those aren't the words I used.
Yeah, and then her idea of vacation includes coming back late from lunch. Like that's just mean to essentially imply that she's the only problem in this equation, that his elaborate attempts are not also an issue, or that he hasn't been manipulative in the past or whatever. Like there's a reason she often distrusts his motives. He keeps giving her reasons. So, just be honest. I'm going skiing. Would you like to come? No? Cool. But we'll arrange something. Yeah.
In all fairness though, Laura and how to put this? Laura is work obsessed, and it's not that she's necessarily easily distracted. It's just that to her, work is like a magnet. And no matter how far away she gets, there's always that pull on her to do some work, be productive, don't waste time. And it does interfere with her willingness to have fun.
And another comment here, I think that manipulation is a ruse. They both know it's a gimmick. Like he says in Trap, she's too smart to be manipulated into anything she doesn't want to do. I do agree with that, but I think here she is kind of falling into this reverse psychology a little bit, because, and she might know that he's being manipulative, but it's working. Despite her best efforts and despite her not wanting to be drawn into it, she's being drawn into it. And I think you're right. She doesn't know how to let go of that, because that's drilled into somebody from a young age. It was drilled into me, right, from a very young age. And this could be part of that like workaholic mindset of coming from a family that is dysfunctional. She would have had to bury herself in work to kind of get away from all of that stuff that was going on at home, right? And in her mind, if like I have trouble just sitting down and not doing something. I really struggle with that. Like I usually take my daughter to horse riding on Tuesdays, and every now and then Scott takes her. And so I have 3 uninterrupted hours in my apartment where I don't have to do anything. And I usually end up sitting there, and I have this like sort of decision paralysis where I'm like, oh God, I don't want to waste these 3 hours, but I also don't want to do work. I want to do something fun, but what do? I don't want to put on a movie because then I have to decide the movie, but then I don't want to just watch TV because I watch TV all the time, but then I don't want to do this because I do this. And I end up probably usually doing nothing because I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. And then there's also that part of in the back of my brain that goes, yeah, but you really should use this to get some work done that you wouldn't otherwise get done because you have time right now and you don't always have time, and you should use this. It's exhausting. So,
I'm going to take a minor disagreement with the comment that we got about the manipulation being a ruse. I understand what the commenter is saying, And let's see how to put this. Because Laura is too smart to be manipulated directly, but everybody has a button or several buttons.
Yeah.
And somebody who knows how to push those buttons is going to get a response out of you, even though you know you're being manipulated, even though you know they're pushing your button. It's a button, and you just automatically respond. And I think that's really kind of what's happening here is that Steele knows her buttons, and he knows how to push them, and he knows what her response is going to be.
He knows the whole switchboard. Like it's not just a button. There's dials, there's levers. There's occasionally lights that flash. Like he knows all of them. And like they've had this argument before in season 1 where Murphy was around when they were trying to get her to go out and have fun and leave the files at home. Like this is not the first time this argument has popped up, and she's sensitive to being told she doesn't know how to have fun. So I think you're right. I think she knows that it is a ruse. She knows that, of course. But at the same time, he also knows how to push her buttons. He knows how to get to her. He knows how to make her get angry. And he knows that if he challenges her, she's going to rise to the occasion, regardless of whether or not it falls into his hands. So it's definitely part and parcel of that.
Well, I think I commented on it in a previous episode that, or maybe it's in my notes for this later on. I'm losing my mind. It's one of those. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to show you I know how to have fun. I've got my checklist right here that says, do this and you're having fun. Do this and you're having fun. Do this and you're having fun. That's Laura in a nutshell.
Yeah.
When Steele pushes her button, it's, I will show you I'm going to have fun by doing all the things on my checklist.
Okay. Required Buffy quote here.
Oh no.
The prom episode of Buffy in season 3, there's a threat to the prom, and Buffy there's all kinds of other stuff going on for her personally, and finally she sort of reaches her breaking point and she says, you guys are going to have a nice, safe, normal prom if I have to kill everybody on the earth to do it. And they're all like, yay. So that's kind of like where I think Laura's at is that moment like, yeah, I can have fun. Look, I have an itemized list and it's all fun. There's much fun here.
That's right. It's she turns it into a job, but it's fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, Laura huffs at the suggestion that her idea of a vacation is coming back late from lunch, and she insists that with the snap of a finger, just like that, she could shut down the agency. And baiting her even more, Laura says, or Steele says, yes, but you never would. And then after a quick he said, she said, Laura tries to win the argument by declaring that when this case is done, she will close the office down for a week, send Mildred on a vacation, and the two of them are going to hit the slopes. We will have fun. I will show you fun.
Yeah, I'll show you fun.
Okay, that was right in my notes, staring me right in the face as I was saying this.
Why does it sound so much like a threat?
Anyway, Steele, with cold and flat sarcasm of somebody anticipating suffering through a painful experience while being told it's going to be fun, says he can hardly wait. Next, we cut to a close-up of a panel of the blaster being inked. Wow, we're an hour into the episode, and this is how far that we've gotten.
Awkward, yeah.
Yes. In the drawing, a mysterious man is outside the window of a house with a container. Perhaps something not good. It's in his hand, and inside the house, we see the silhouette of a man. What's that line from Queen? I'm sorry. I see the little silhouette of a man. That just popped right into my head as I said that. Anyway, presumably it's Dick Darkside. This is going to be the craziest episode we've ever done. Then we cut to the street outside of a tall apartment building, and we see the limo pull up in front. Laura and Steele exit the limo. They walk to the front door of the building, and Steele presses the buzzer of the security system for the apartment. Inside, we see Artie get up from his drawing table, located on the second floor of the apartment, and walk down the stairs to the phone. Picks up the phone, answers the security buzzer. It's Steele. He buzzes to let Steele and Laura in. We again see a close-up of the panel of the blaster. But now the container in the hand of the mysterious man clearly reads, poison. After having buzzed Steele and Laura into the building, and as he's waiting for them to get to his apartment, Artie goes to the kitchen, puts a tea kettle onto the gas stove, lights a burner, and then exits the kitchen. And we see a shot of Laura and Steele entering the elevator, headed up to Artie's apartment. And we see another close-up of another panel of the blaster. The canister of gas has come crashing through the window, and we see the dialogue bubble of Dick Darkside's exclamation, "It's poisonous gas!"
Yeah.
And as we hear the sound of the tea kettle on the stove starting to whistle, we cut to a shot of the kettle with a strange yellow steam coming from the top. Then we see Laura and Steele exit the elevator and begin to walk toward the door of Artie's apartment. In another panel of the blaster, we see Dick Darkside struggling through the cloud of poisonous gas to try to reach the container on the floor of his room. And we again cut to a shot of the kettle. Now the strange yellow steam is pouring out of the top. And then in a shot of the door to the kitchen from the living room, we see that a cloud of the mysterious yellow steam is starting to flow out of the kitchen and starting to fill the apartment as the buzzer on the front door of the apartment begins sounding. And outside the door of the apartment, we see that Steele is the person leaning on the buzzer with Laura standing next to him. And then again, we see another shot of the kitchen from the kitchen doorway from the living room. And the mysterious yellow steam is now filling the apartment. Outside the door, Laura gets a perplexed look on her face. She smells something, asks Steele what it is. He sniffs the air several times, then comments that it smells like almonds. After a moment, Laura calls out to Artie, and Steele again presses the buzzer as Laura begins to knock and call for Artie to open the door. Starting to get concerned, Laura reaches into her purse and extracts her lockpick set. Steele motions for her to put it away. No time for finesse. He steps back and runs at the door, but in a slight nod to the reality of Hollywood.
Doors, yeah.
Yeah, the door fails to open. Well, no, in a slight nod to reality, the door fails to open. Steele grabs his shoulder, having bruised it in his attempt to bang through the door. Then he steps back, takes another run at it, and this time Hollywood succeeds. Yeah. The door manages to break open, and Steele and Laura go into the apartment. Inside, the yellow mist is filled, and Laura and Steele begin waving at the air, which I'm sorry, that does absolutely nothing to prevent you from breathing in the gas or whatever it is.
No. I have a question about this gas in and of itself, because it's later revealed that it's potassium cyanide, right? Mm-hmm. Is it though? Because we know that Artie has done this to himself to maintain the illusion that somebody's trying to kill him. So I doubt he would put actual poison in his kettle, because he's relying on Steele and Laura to burst in there and save him. But what if they didn't? What if that was just somebody who got the wrong apartment, or what if they decided to call 911 and leave him there? Or what if there's a whole host of things that could have gone wrong if that was actual poison in there. So I'm wondering if it was something else.
I don't know. I think I remember doing research on this that for whatever reason, I did not get into my notes. And I'm thinking that you're right. Here. No, it is here in my notes. Well, silly me. Because it's a little bit later, because after they find him and they check to see if he's breathing, they go to a commercial. We come back and we see Artie and Laura sitting on the couch in his living room, and Steele comes in from the kitchen with a kettle in hand, which, that would have been a problem, because the apartment would have had to have been completely ventilated. The furniture and the carpeting in the entire building, and their clothes would likely need to be contaminated, and them being hosed down and treated by medical professionals, as even a few seconds of exposure can be harmful.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it'd have to be something else then.
That or very, very diluted, maybe, with just enough of the gas to maybe cause a problem, but mixed with something else that replicates the almond smell, which, although cyanide is popularly attributed to have a almond smell, the information I read indicates that the scent isn't always present, or at least that not everyone can smell it. So
interesting.
But no, I think you got a point. Artie would have to have been very, very careful about that. Maybe just put just enough in to qualify as...
Because he's trusting that they're going to fly in and save him somehow. And I don't know about you, but even if I am a murderer with no conscience, I'm still not going to trust that the good guys are going to get there in time.
Even if you're a psychopath that just doesn't see a problem with any of this, you're going to leave yourself a way out.
Yeah.
So anyway, Steele says that somebody put capsules containing potassium cyanide in a tea kettle, and so once they dissolved in the water, it turned the ordinary steam into deadly gas. Artie appears to be visibly stressed and upset, as anyone who is targeted for such a violent act would be. Laura picks up the comic artwork that has somehow made its way down from Artie's drawing table on the second floor to being down now on the coffee table in the living room. She holds it up and says that Artie had said that particular strip wouldn't even run until the next day. So would anyone know about the contents of it before then? And I'm going to throw a red flag on that play, because he was working on the strip upstairs. That's not how this works. You do not get it done and turn it in and it prints the next day. No, doesn't happen.
No, they do these weeks in advance.
Sometimes months.
They have to, because if you're sick or something like that, then
and if it's a syndicated strip, it would have to pass through too many hands. First of all, you'd have to send it to the syndicate. They would have to reproduce it, send it out to all the papers. It's just, there's so many hands that would have to go through before it even gets to the newspaper, the local newspaper itself. And then they have to put it all together and assemble it as part of their comic page, as part of that day's printing. So it's just, no, it would not happen like that. So, okay, shorthand, television shorthand. I get it, but I'm
like
sorry.
The aesthetics of the pen?
That's different. That's acceptable.
Oh, okay. So I can't be picky, but you're allowed to be. That's the rule.
Sure,
is that how that is? Okay, sure.
Yeah, just like Laura.
Okay, for me, not for thee.
Yeah, I mean, just like Laura, you don't go out and investigate cases on your own, but I can.
Okay. Pound salt, Buster.
Anyway, Artie answers that yes, there are some people who would know about the contents of the strip before it ran. Presumably Paul Steuben, since he approves the stories and the rough sketches, Sid Rothman, who runs the syndicate, and Steele. When Artie doesn't mention Raymond Kelly, Steele asks if Kelly would know, and Artie says, well, yeah, of course. I mean, he draws the strip. And then, of course, when Steele's point seems to hit home to Artie, he becomes agitated, insisting that Ray would never. And Laura asks, well, did he have access to the tea kettle? And Artie too quickly and unconvincingly says, no. Artie, Steele says, he gives him that warning tone of voice, and so Artie reluctantly admits that, well, okay, Ray brought some sketches down from Santa Barbara the previous day, but says that Sid was there too, having come back to check on Artie's work. So, it's okay. And Steele says that now it's time for he and Laura to take a trip to Santa Barbara to check on the blaster himself. Artie stands, stressed, distressed, insists that Steele doesn't understand. Ray has no reason to want him dead. He loves Artie like the son he never had. We'll smile in. Laura puts her hand on Artie's shoulder, presses him back down to his seat, and tells him that they know about his liaison with Mrs. Kelly. And Artie leans back, visibly deflated and chagrined. Steele comments that Raymond Kelly could be jealous as well about Artie's talents.
Wow, bold of him to assume that Artie is also talented.
Yeah. Anyway, my question here was, where did we learn anything about any sort of special talent that Artie has?
I'm wondering that too.
All we know is that he was schlepping Mrs. Kelly, and not that he had anything extraordinary that he brought to said schlepping.
Artie has this perfect himbo look to him as well. So maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just the blank pretty face. Could be that. Just saying.
Anyway, Artie seems ashamed and admits that when Ray's wife chased him, he didn't know how to say no.
I do. No. There it is. That's no is a sentence. No. I'm sorry, Mrs. Kelly. I'm not into that.
And as far as Ray being jealous, Artie's voice breaks as he says, everything I am, I owe to him. 3 years ago, when I left art school, he was the only person who would give me a break. He worked with me, trained me. It's not Ray. I know.
And the Oscar goes to...
It's a nice story, but the logical flaw here is that nothing Artie says in any way precludes Ray from being jealous or hating Artie enough to kill him. I mean, having taken Artie...
very often when the teacher surpasses the master, that is cause for jealousy. Or, no, the student surpasses the teacher. That's what I meant to say. I got it. I got it right.
Yeah. You know, and so having taken Artie in and under his wing doesn't mean that Raymond Kelly is just going to ignore the fact that Artie was, you know, schlepping his wife. And it does make Artie seem a bit naive, which of course is the plan.
Well, like I said, perfect himbo. Yeah. He's got those, like, he's got the innocent orphan Annie eyes, right? He's got the whole look to him, like the floppy hair and the goofy manner and the, almost like the same thing that Jarvis does, you know?
Yep.
Only he's using his talents for evil.
Okay, next we see a large castle-like structure atop a hill. It's surrounded by fog. Yes.
Okay. How? I was unaware that writing a syndicated comic strip got you a castle. I'm doing the wrong job. Like, how does he have a castle?
Well,
it's not even a mansion. It's a full-on. It's got turrets and stone gargoyles and does he have another income we're not aware of here? Like,
maybe his wife had money.
Maybe, because I mean, I can't imagine that the even writers like Schultz, Peanuts, and stuff like that. Like, I can't imagine. They're probably very wealthy people, especially if their comic strips get turned into movies and stuff. But at the same time, a castle? I don't know. I'm just...
Well, maybe he bought it as a fixer-upper, you know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Lots of castles on the market that need work.
That's right. Probably most of them need work. Probably not too many of them on the market, but most of them probably need work.
True.
Anyway, the castle's surrounded by fog, and the limo appears through the fog, drives through the stereotypical castle gate, and into the center court, or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Steele and Laura get out, but as Steele begins to walk toward the front door, Laura is frozen into place. And it's not just the eerie atmosphere of the fog surrounding the castle, but also the gargoyles lining the top of the structure. When Steele tries to get
creepy.
her... Yeah, they are. The whole place is creepy, actually. When Steele tries to get when Steele tries to get her attention and break the spell, Laura, continuing to stare at the gargoyles, utters, "Psycho." And Steele's...
Have you noticed that so far, everyone, like, all the movie references have come from somebody other than Steele? Laura has made two, Gone in 60 Seconds and Psycho. I can't remember who was the one that used the Cujo comment. Was that
was that
Steele?
Artie,
okay.
And then he also made the comment about, and Cindy made the Mrs. Robinson comment. Yeah.
Right. Not one movie reference so far has been used by Steele, which is kind of interesting because usually he's the one spouting off all the movie references.
Yeah. Well, Steele's confused at her mention of Psycho, and she breathlessly cites the attributions and then says that when she was 4, her sister Frances took her to see it. She couldn't go near a shower for years after that, and this house reminds her of the Psycho house, and I throw another red flag.
How did she wash her hair?
How did she get in? Psycho was rated
easy.
R.
That's easy.
Psycho was rated R, and even if Frances had been an adult at the time, which she wasn't, there's no way that Laura would have been admitted into the theater. And it's guaranteed that at the time, even Frances herself wouldn't have been allowed into a theater to watch it. And what do you mean you got to know theaters?
I got into a lot of movies before I was 18 years of age. Some of them I was very young. There were certain movie theaters that did not give a damn how old you were. They just let you in. Although There were others that did definitely check IDs, because I have a really funny story. My brother and I went to see The Hills Have Eyes, and this was when I was at university. I was 23 at the time. This was the remake, obviously, not the original. And he would have been about 16. He's my youngest brother. So he was not of age. And we have a slightly different rating system, because R for us is not the hard R for you guys. It's not the same.
Okay.
I think it's the other way around. We've got 18A and then an R, whereas you guys have like the R and then there's the NC-17, which is like the rating they all want to avoid, right? But 18A is like you can get in with an adult as long as you've got somebody there that's 18, you can see it. Then the hard R for us is like no one gets in, it doesn't happen, right? That was the movie that had that rating. Very rarely does a movie get that rating here in Canada. We're pretty lenient with our movie ratings. But we went to see this movie. My brother was 16, and he at the time was 6 feet. Well, he still is 6'1" or whatever it is. Big beard. Okay, even at 16, he's got a lot of facial hair, and he walks right on in. Guy doesn't even look at him. Okay, but he stops me. I'm 23, and he asks me for ID. And my brother is behind the guy, and he's like this, like pointing at me and kind of laughing. And I'm like, you son of a, and I have to just, I dig in, I find my ID, I show it to him. I really wanted to say, yeah, why didn't you check him? But if I had, we wouldn't have seen the movie. But yeah, I got into a lot of movies I shouldn't have gotten into at a young age. So
okay, but she says that Frances took her in. Frances would have been less than 10. 8, maybe? So how would an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old get into an R-rated movie at a theater? I don't care how lenient they are. I mean, I'm not buying it. Not buying it one bit.
My issue was the shower comment. I couldn't go near a shower for years. How'd she wash her hair?
Kitchen sink.
Just not bathe for
kitchen sink.
Several years.
Sponge bath. Kitchen sink.
I agree with you. It would have made more sense for her to just simply say that she saw the movie when she was... Did she actually say they went to a theater? She said she took her to see it.
Took her to see it. So that implies...
because I saw Nightmare on Elm Street when I was 8, but that was at the neighbor's house, right? Like
see, that's... Laura when she was 4, this would have been 1958, 59. No DVRs. No
comments here.
Video...
Suggesting they didn't pay, they snuck in or paid for a different movie. That could be it. Then ran into the other theater, right? Because
wouldn't they have somebody at the door to the actual theater itself, not just at
here?
The
they don't. Here they just look at your ticket when you go in, and they ask if they're going to ID you. They ID you there. They don't usually have somebody at the theater door. They just kind of trust that you're going into the theater you say you are. Especially now that there's assigned seats, right? Because with the assigned seats, you would get booted out by the person. But I mean, back then they would just kind of like take you at your word, or at least they did with us. And this is coming from a fellow Canadian, so.
Okay, what? That comment just blew my whole argument. So no more comments. No. We will disconnect everybody from comments. So anyway.
But I will say that it isn't uncommon to, like I said, I was watching movies I should not have been watching at a very young age. And in fact, I got my parents to rent a lot of them. Like we would go to the movie rental store and I would grab horror movies when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, and they would just rent them for us. They did not care. So, and then, what if it was a re-release when they were teens? Well, but she does say she was 4, so yeah.
So anyway. At Laura's reference to Psycho, Steele is still perplexed and says that the house looks nothing like the Psycho house.
Yeah, that's true.
And Laura says she didn't say it looked like it. It reminded her of it. The reminiscent foreboding, the aura of doom, the almost palpable feeling of evil.
Got going on, right? Like
somebody overdid it with the fog machine. That's the problem.
Yeah,
yes,
that's the problem.
Anyway, Steele says that she's letting her imagination or clever studio effects run away with her sense of rationality.
Yep.
Steele tries to lighten the mood by telling her that they are there to see Raymond Kelly, not Norman Bates.
That's a misnomer because it's actually his mother. But... Well, it's him as his mother. But whatever. That's fine.
Anyway, inside, Laura and Steele walk down a massive set of stairs into a very large, I guess it's his studio room that includes a very elaborate water feature And in the room is Raymond Kelly practicing his putting on a large circle of artificial grass.
Still like to know how comic strip writers live like this, but okay.
And at this point, I've got a note here that says it would have been great if they had been able to get Stan Lee to play Raymond Kelly.
Oh my God, that would have been perfect. That would have been fantastic.
Yeah, he has appeared in TV shows. So
oh yeah.
That would have been perfect casting if they could. It probably wasn't even an option, but it would have been fun if it was.
This is sort of before he started doing cameos and everything under the sun, but it would have been a really good.
Yeah, it would have been fun.
Nod to the genre for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. And Kelly looks up, greets Steele and Laura. He greets Steele and then asks Laura, "What's your name, Toots?" Yeah, very
doll face.
Yeah, very 1950s, 1940s, 1930s. Yeah. Laura introduces herself and identifies herself and Steele as private investigators. And Kelly responds, "Oh, yeah, a couple of dicks. I suppose you came for some help from the blaster." And Steele, seemingly humoring the man, who probably thinks of himself as the blaster at this point, says,
so. Yeah.
Yes, in a manner of speaking, they are, because they're there to talk about Artie Wayne. And Kelly becomes angry.
Ooh, yeah,
he raises his putter and shoves it into their face in a threatening manner and orders them out of the house, saying that if they're there on any business for that no-good, self-righteous weasel, they are not welcome. And Laura tries to clarify, saying that, oh, no, Artie's in danger. Artie's in great physical danger. And Kelly just insists that Laura doesn't understand, calls her doll, says that he doesn't know what Artie's up to this time, but he's not getting anything more from Raymond Kelly. Steele slaps the club away from his face and Laura's, calmly advises Kelly that they have evidence that strongly suggests he's trying to kill Artie. Kelly tells Steele that he's worse than those attorneys and those other three-piece suits that Artie sends, and that he can tell that parasite same thing he told those attorneys and other three-piece suits. The well is dry. And in a confused and somewhat pleading tone, Laura says that Artie reveres Kelly. And angrily, Kelly says, "And why not? I'm Fort Knox. But money isn't good enough for him. No, he wants credit for saving the blaster. Well, lady, he's not going to get it. There's only one blaster, and that's me," as he strikes a pose, mimicking the pose of the blaster and the poster on the wall behind him.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, Raymond Kelly's reaction, while a bit over the top, is
in retrospect justified. Understandable.
Yeah, like you can understand maybe not threatening physical violence against Steele and Laura because they've just wandered into his house, but the anger, the fury, the how dare he come at me, like, and of course he just unfortunately seems even more crazy right now.
Yeah.
Because Laura and Steele are coming from this place of believing that Artie is the one that is in danger and that Raymond Kelly is the potential person that Artie is in danger of. And it's just, it's not going well. You got to feel bad. I feel bad for poor Ray. I mean, this guy, and I'm feeling bad for a guy with a waterfall in his living room. So I don't know what that
says. Well, when you're rich enough, a waterfall in the middle of your house is not a big deal.
I don't know if I'd want a waterfall in my house. Of all the things, like I look at some of these mansions and things like that people have, and I think to myself, I don't think people that are spending $10,000 for a pair of sunglasses and stuff.
Yeah,
you've got too much time on your there comes a point where I don't know.
More money than sense.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. Like who decides? Hey, you know what? I've got a castle. What I really need is a waterfall. That's really going to complement the feng shui.
Right.
You know? Well, it is that way.
Every castle needs a waterfall. Yeah, anyway, exactly. Laura's had enough. She sternly tells Kelly that if anything happens to Artie, they're going to nail him to the wall. Steele takes Laura by the arm, turns her around, and then they begin to leave. And Raymond Kelly begins swinging his golf club in the air behind them, giving us the impression that he is absolutely mad, and I don't mean angry.
Yeah.
Just
mad. off his nut, but he's yes. Obviously not. He's just being driven to the point of like he's been driven here. If he is losing control, it's because this is the last straw in a series of events that have gotten him to that point. So,
well, next, the limo drives through the darkened streets of Los Angeles, and Laura and Steele are inside talking. Steele's convinced they have their man. Laura doesn't seem so convinced and suggests that they talk to Sid Rothman to see if Sid knows what's really going on between Ray and Artie. Steele accuses Laura of dragging her feet and being afraid of wrapping up the case because then she would have to put up or shut up about shutting down the agency, taking a vacation, and having fun. Laura gives a light chuckle and a self-satisfied sigh, reaches into her purse and pulls out a pair of airline ticket sleeves and hands them to Remington.
I hope these ones are refundable because we're up to 4 plane trips that just didn't happen in the last few episodes.
Yeah.
I know I've said this before, but the amount of money that they have wasted on airline tickets or hotel accommodations or whatever else it is that just doesn't end up coming to pass. Although, to be fair, these airline tickets do get used, just not by Laura.
Yeah, that's true.
And maybe that's why they actually do use them. Maybe that's why she doesn't try to get a refund, because the airline's you know what? This is the 4th time we've done this. We're not refunding you again, Miss Holt. You're going to have to take this flight. This is getting ridiculous. I would like to point out that Laura, I'm going to give her some kudos here because there have been times where we've complained that Laura is supposed to be smarter than the writers have her act, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a good moment for Laura because she's seeing there's something really not right about this case. You've got a client who seems to worship the ground Raymond Kelly walks on and seems completely oblivious to any ill feeling that Raymond Kelly might have for him. And then you've got Raymond Kelly who's waving around his golf club and acting like he's about to just
kill everybody.
I don't want to. Yeah, exactly. And Laura's going, no, the math isn't mathing here. Something's not right. Nobody's that naive. Nobody is that naive as Artie as to think that this guy doesn't hate me to my very core. So she's kind of like, yeah, it's too easy. It's too easy to kind of assume that Kelly is trying to kill Artie and that Artie is just too stupid to see it. So kudos to Laura for recognizing that the math is not mathing. And of course, Steele not noticing it because he's too busy thinking about his downhill skiing and, Jean-Claude. So
I thought you were going somewhere else with that down. But anyway.
No, well, I was going to. That's why I paused or stopped myself.
Anyway, Steele looks at the tickets inside the sleeves, reads the information, and says, open return. Impressive. But obviously, he doesn't sound impressed.
Doesn't an open return mean they could come back whenever they wanted?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't that mean that they could theoretically stay as long as they wanted and spend a numerous amount of nights together, cozied up in the ski lodge? Would that not get his engine revving, so to speak?
Yeah, but they're still limited by availability at the lodge. So if the lodge says, you know what? You've stayed your 5 days. We need this room for somebody else. You're out. They're going to go.
I'm just saying that her having an open return is implying that she's open to staying a while.
Yeah. Or open to letting him stay while she comes back.
Yeah, maybe. That's true. You know what? You have fun with Jean-Claude. I'm going home.
That's right. Anyways, Steele doesn't sound impressed when he reads that. He hands her one ticket back, confirms his pessimism by telling her that the jury is still out and he won't be convinced until he sees her making snow angels in Aspen. In Aspen. Oh, yes, we are. We are tripping. Laura is annoyed about his attitude, which has clearly morphed from being an invitation into a dare. And with the barest hint of a grin on his lips, Steele admits his tactic. He says, I know you relish a challenge, Miss Holt.
I like that this line is here because otherwise it just makes him look petty. But at least with this, he's basically saying, yeah, this is a game and I'm making you play it, but hey, you are playing it. So
that's right.
and for her to be like, yeah, okay, fine. There's a mutual sort of if she continues on with this, they've mutually agreed to it.
Yeah.
We're good, you know. Of course, it never happens because of course it doesn't happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the next morning, Laura and Steele are in the offices of Sid Rothman. He tells Laura and Steele that Ray hates Artie. The kid is just too busy worshiping to notice. And Laura asks why Ray doesn't fire Artie if he truly hates him that much. Rothman says that Ray may not want to admit it, but he doesn't have the style that Artie does, calling Artie's style a rare talent.
I'm wondering, because obviously the blaster was popular for quite a while before the popularity started to sag. And so I know I asked before, like, who was inking the comic prior to Artie? Now I'm thinking it was Kelly. And I'm thinking that maybe whatever his style was, maybe just fell out of vogue, and that Artie's talent has sort of revitalized the strip, because sometimes it's kind of like Doctor Who, right? You had Doctor Who that started in the 60s and it went all the way through, and then they did that terrible American film, no offense, but once the Americans got a hold of it, they butchered it. And then they revived it in 2005, and that revival, while very, very different, had a lot of the original stuff that the original OG Whovians could get into, and so it kind of like gave it new life, right? Kind of like Pierce Brosnan also sort of revitalized James Bond after and I like Timothy Dalton personally, but the franchise had kind of taken a hit, right? So I'm thinking that it wasn't necessarily that Kelly didn't have the talent, it was just that whatever his style was no longer what was popular. Maybe it was looking a bit old and stale, and that Artie's style was what kind of like kicked it into high gear again. And so obviously Kelly, knowing that, can't get rid of him, and that's gotta suck.
Yeah. Well, it's also possible that Raymond Kelly's skills as an inker had declined as well.
Oh yeah,
so
true,
it could be a combination of
yeah,
it could be a combination of the things. But no, you're right about styles. I mean, you go back and you look at, I mentioned it before, Batman. I was never a huge Batman fan. Those types of comics just never really did it for me. But if you go back and look at the Batman comics of the 60s, and then you look at the current Batman, totally different style of art.
Oh yeah,
different style of story. I mean, everything about it is different. Same characters, but the presentation is different because the expectation, the tastes, and all the elements that make a strip, the audience has different, what they're expecting has changed over the years.
And if you speak to any comic book nerd out there, they'll tell you that oftentimes with a different run and a different artist, you know, one storyline will kind of like launch into high gear, especially if that artist has something in their art that makes people, like the Frank Miller run of Batman, for example, was one of the more popular ones because of the art. And I actually I took a course called Popular Narrative where we watched movies and films and also looked at graphic novels and romance novels and mystery novels and all kinds of different art forms of narratives. So that was one of the things we looked at. I used to collect Archie comics. I had preferences to the art as well. And I had boxes upon boxes of Archie comics. It started out as a bribe. My mom would take me to the grocery store and she would tell me that if I didn't ask for anything in the grocery store, I would get an Archie at the end. So I would not bug her about chocolate or, you know, candies or cookies or whatever, because I knew I'd get that Archie. And I did. I would get my Archie and I'd go home and I'd read it and I'd put it in my box. And by the end of it, but I would know, like, by the time I ended up getting rid of them eventually, but I had, because those digests would have the current Archies, but they would also feature older stories from like the 50s and 60s and stuff like that. So I would know how old that little story within the digest was just by the art, and had different preferences for different art. So yeah, it definitely makes a difference for sure.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I've never been much of a Batman fan, although I will admit that I loved Batman 66. And there was a whole series of comic books done based on Batman 66 that I would love to have, just because I love Batman 66. But then again, I also like the Green Hornet from that era too, even though it only lasted a season. But yeah. Anyway, Steele comments that it seems as though maybe Artie should be having his own strip, and Rothman does not disagree, saying that a few months earlier, Artie had brought Rothman a great strip, but he had to turn it down because, comics, they're not like television, changing shows like people change their dirty underwear. He told...
Oh, this is breaking the fourth wall here. And wink to the industry, but it's also very condescending. Like, we're not like TV where you guys are just like throwing out stuff all the time. Like, this is art.
Yes. Although most artists would disagree with that. Rothman says he told Artie that they would talk anytime one of the syndicate strips fell out, but that's not likely to happen anytime in the near future. And Steele asks if Ray knew about Artie's desire for his own strip and the submission he'd made. And the answer is, of course. Rothman says that the day after he and Artie talked, he saw Artie with his hand in a cast, which was apparently Ray's opinion of Artie's grand notions. Rothman sadly nods his head at the recounting, and Steele and Laura exchange grim looks.
Again, one of those things that Laura's sort of chalking up in her head is like, he can't really believe that he doesn't hate him if he's put his hand in the cast, right? And now that I'm thinking about what Sid said, when you think about comic strips that you read, I mean, he's right. Like, I can think back to, I haven't physically picked up a print newspaper in a long time. But
as anybody.
Well, to be fair. But I mean, my parents used to own a diner, and I used to go, open it in the mornings, and I would get the paper and I'd go through and I'd do the crossword and I would read the comics. And of course, if you mention like Calvin and Hobbes, like you said, everyone knows that strip because that strip lasted for decades. The Peanuts comics, right? The For Better or For Worse. I'm assuming a lot of people would recognize Kathy Marmaduke. All of these are all strips that have gone like literally generations, crossed over generations. So now today's generations won't know them because again, they don't pick up a newspaper strip either. But those of us who sort of went through that print generation for news would definitely, they don't change their strips out very often.
No.
Yeah.
Well, there's two reasons why a strip would disappear. One is that the artist, well, three reasons. The artist quits doing the strip. The syndication house stops distributing it. They drop the strip and nobody else picks it up. Or a local paper may drop it because they're revamping and they've decided, well, we don't want to do 2 pages worth of comics. We're only going to do 1 page of comics. And so we're going to get rid of these comics out of our stack. But yeah, you'd get the comics and it would be the same ones every single day, every single week. So yeah, they didn't change often.
I just Googled something because I was really curious, especially about the money. Because in this conversation, I'm thinking to myself, wouldn't it make more sense for Artie, instead of trying to get a comic strip in a paper, if he's this talented and he's made a name for himself enough that people know him, to get an agent and publish his own graphic novel or his own comic for people to buy?
Yeah, graphic novels I don't think didn't exist back then.
But well, I say graphic novel meaning like comic that people can pick up in the comic shop, right?
Like the dime comics.
Yeah, exactly. Because I Googled it because I'm still stuck in this hole. The guy's got a waterfall in his flipping house, right? And according to this is the first thing that popped up. So I'm not entirely sure what time period this is looking at, but it says here, odds and money for syndicated daily cartoons. What a newspaper pays for a strip varies according to circulation and other factors. On average, a syndicated cartoonist will earn $6 per paper carrying the strip per week. Most comics appear in 100 papers, give or take. So that's about $600 a week or $31,000 a year before taxes. An okay salary, but I wouldn't want to raise a large family on it. Some poor circulation strips make the cartoonist $100 a week, which is well below the federal poverty line. In other words, for most cartoonists, strips are not a very lucrative field. If your primary goal is to get rich, this is not the job you want. That said, let's consider the top end just for the fun of it. Calvin and Hobbes appeared in roughly 2,400 papers. So that would be about $14,400 a week or $720,000 a year. That would presumably be the most a cartoonist could make from newspapers alone, although of course there are additional sources of income available to most successful cartoonists, such as book collections and licensing. I'm still going to call bullcrap on the castle thing because you'd still have to make more than $1 million to get the castle. But I can't imagine that Artie's going to be looking at a massive salary with this Blaster comic.
Mm-hmm.
So why not look into, rather than resort to, I don't know, murder, why not look into, can I get an agent to take my story and make it into a comic that gets sold in comic book stores? Because Superman, Batman, all of these characters were massively popular and made a ton of money, and certain runs and certain artists were making bank even in the 80s. This was still a niche field, but
there's a big but here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I almost said I like big butts,
guys. And he likes big butts and he cannot lie.
That's right. Most of those comic books that you'd go down to the drugstore and buy off the stand were affiliated with some sort of syndicate, and you're not just going to self-publish. No, but you're still, I don't, at least back at this time in the 80s, you were not going to self-publish a comic book, and you'd have to get a publisher. Of course, the big ones were Marvel and such and such. What it was, the other guys there, DC and Marvel, or Disney,
Dark Horse.
I don't think Dark Horse existed back then. But you'd have to have one of these big comic book publishing companies buy your strip and print it and distribute it that way, because back then self-publishing was not a thing.
I'm not saying he should self-publish. I'm saying the man should get himself an agent and get in with one of these companies, because I don't know that it worked that way though. For publishing it would, because you'd have, if you've made a name for himself, which he obviously has, and he does have an agent, doesn't he? Isn't that who Sid Rothman is? Or
no, he's the head of the syndicate.
Oh, okay. But yeah, if you've made enough of a name for yourself that, and I actually learned this from reading Jeff's book, because Jeff Melvoin's book, because although he was talking about television writing, writers did in fact have agents, and he talks about what agents do and what they can do for you or not do for you. And granted, that's television writing, but I also know people who have written books and things like that have also gotten agents and stuff like that. So you would definitely, and Dark Horse Comics was founded in 1986. Sorry, that was just random because I was looking it up. But yeah, if he has a name for himself from the Blaster as an inker, he would be able to at least get a foot in the door.
That's different than being a creator. And
but he has an idea, right?
Well, he may, but I'm thinking, and I don't know that this is
you just want this guy
factual.
to be a murderer.
Well, no. But I'm thinking that most comic strips or most comic books that were put out by these companies were created in-house. They wanted to own the content. They wanted to own the intellectual property, and they were not going to be looking at bringing and contracting with somebody who's outside of the organization, because then they don't own the property and they don't have enough control over it. So I don't know.
Well, they would. I mean, they've been known to buy intellectual properties and put them under their banner, right?
Buy intellectual properties, not rent, which is what I think you're talking about, where Artie would create the comic strip and he'd still own it, but he would be doing a publishing deal with this company over here or that company over there.
Yeah, he'd still get to create his comic, though. This is ultimately what he wants, is he wants to create his comic and he wants to get it out there. The papers are saying no, because as long as the Blaster's popular, they're not going to drop it, right? Mm-hmm. So a logical non-murdery idea would be to get your comic in something elsewhere, either through DC or some other company that's willing to. I mean, you're going to be working for somebody, sure, but he's working for somebody now anyway. He's working for the paper, right? So,
well, no, he's not working for the paper. He's working for
Kelly. But but either way, it's
which
you're
brings
always
its own
working for
issues
somebody.
later.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just saying that Artie had options. Murder. It's like the guys in the restaurant. They gave us a bad review. Now we have to murder. Murder. Okay. Like that's always the first place they go. Guys, get a career counselor. Just talk through your options is all I'm saying.
Anyway, getting back into the episode, we see Artie inking another panel of the Blaster, and in the narrative dialogue box at the top of the panel, we read, Above the jungle waterfall, Dick Darkside and the Blaster meet in mortal combat. The camera pulls.
Sorry. Mortal Kombat. Anyway, sorry. It's the video game to sing it.
The camera pulls back as Artie continues to work, and we see that Laura and Steele are standing in front of his work table, and they're demanding to know why Artie hadn't told them that Ray had broken his hand. And Artie insists, through clenched teeth, pen held in it, that he didn't. And Artie
he just cracked it a little.
Yeah, that's right. He didn't break it. He cracked it. Yeah. And besides, it was Artie's own fault. He got in the way of Ray's putter, which is like saying, it's my fault I got shot because I got in the way of the bullet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was swinging it around and it just happened to hit
That's right.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Well, Steele is outraged. He hollers, Artie, face the facts. The man wants to kill you. And in a more controlled, but still angry tone, Laura insists that there's no telling what Ray is dreaming up for Artie in that strip. Well, Artie holds up the strip he's been working on, and then hands it to Steele and says that the messenger just brought that strip, which has the Blaster and Dick's Darkside out in the middle of a jungle. Riley observing that there aren't too many jungles around Los Angeles. Well, Steele's still angry, and he insists that the Arboretum could be a jungle. The park down the street could be a jungle. The garden out back. As far as Ray's concerned, the whole bloody thing could be a jungle.
If we go by the lyrics of Guns N' Roses, all of L.A. is a jungle.
It's a jungle out there.
Welcome to the jungle. Yeah, just thinking "Welcome to the Jungle" by Guns N' Roses. Anyway,
Artie jokingly asks Steele if he's telling Artie that he has a jungle out there.
Yep, there you go.
Is a fun tune by Three Dog Night.
Hey, I love hearing Three Dog Night mentioned in anything because I feel like they don't get enough recognition. So,
Well, trying to settle the situation, Laura calmly suggests that it would be a good idea if someone stayed with Artie until the guilty party, whoever that is apprehended. Well, Artie doesn't like the idea. He's got a lot of work to do, and he won't be able to concentrate if he knows that somebody's hovering around him, babysitting him. Steele starts to respond, but Artie cuts him off, telling them to just go home. He will call them if he needs them. Well, next, it's night. Laura is... Yeah.
Keep going. I'll insert when necessary, but I've got some issues with this whole setup.
Laura is sitting in the Rabbit, bundled up in a heavy coat and gloves. She's quietly looking at the apartment building in which Artie lives through a pair of binoculars. The sound of Remington's voice comes over the walkie-talkie. Dashing Dave to Dollface. Come in, Dollface. Over. And Laura picks up her half of the walkie-talkie pair, keys the mic, and without thinking begins to respond with the Dollface name, catches herself, and then says, Laura here, and then admonishes Steele for his juvenile behavior, saying that there really isn't a need for code names, especially Dollface, I'm sure. She asks how things are looking from his position, and we see that Steele is on a rooftop, lounging in a beach chair with what looks like warm drinks and snacks to him and a portable space heater to help keep him warm. Although I'm not sure too many rooftops have power outlets, but okay.
Yeah, well, that was one of my questions, but okay, I got to say two things to this, okay?
Okay.
One, Laura's only got herself to blame for freezing in that car, right? Like he's doing work smarter, not harder. I gotta give him props for like bringing all the essentials for his little stakeout. But two, should they not be doing this in shifts?
They're trying to cover both sides of a building.
I get it, but at the same time, like one of them, I don't know. It just seems like you've got Mildred too. Could Mildred not have worked one of the shifts so that at least one of them got some sleep? Because like they fall asleep.
Yeah. Well, they could have gone about it better.
He did bring himself a coffee maker, so that was smart of him.
Yes.
Like he's got his coffee, his whatever, and then
he
he's
had entertainment. He had entertainment.
He's not even watching Artie's building. He's watching some woman get undressed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, priorities.
Yeah, I suppose.
Anyway, yes, we see that he is entertained by the sights around, and he responds to Laura that Surveillance is hell, claiming it is a paraphrase of a great American leader, which I presume is intended to be a reference to William Tecumseh Sherman's observation that war is hell. Steele asks if there's any sign of... Yeah, you're sure, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, this Canadian says, yep, I agree.
Steele asks if there's any sign of Ray from her side, and she responds in the negative, and that she's freezing. Why doesn't she just start the car and run the heater periodically?
I was wondering this myself because, again, I'm going to the drive-in tonight, presumably if it doesn't rain, and we're going to have to do that because the temperature has dropped significantly from a few days ago. So, yeah, we're going to have to turn the car on every now and then and run the heater. But as long as you're not running it for the entire night, you're not going to kill your battery. You should be fine.
Right.
So,
and if she's in a good position to observe but not easily be observed, it shouldn't be a problem, especially since the early 80s vehicles, which her Rabbit is, the lights do not come on automatically like most cars these days are designed to, if people would use the function.
We'll save that for our road rage podcast. We have a whole that has to happen at this point because
But nowadays, if you've got your car lights set to automatic, when you start the car, the lights come on. At least the daytime running lights do, which are mandatory on newer cars, and they always come on. But back then, she could have run the car for 5-10 minutes at a time, warmed up a little bit. Yeah. So it's kind of her problem. Anyway,
someone said if it was okay for Jimmy Stewart. I also got to say, I mean, thermoses existed. She could have a hot coffee in a thermos. Laura, come on.
Yeah,
you've made your own bed here.
Well, Steele suggests that she might be warmed up by fantasizing, picturing a ski lodge with a fireplace in the center. He pauses to take a sip of his hot beverage because. Apparently, though, he thinks the imagination will do it for Laura, it's not good enough for him. And Laura picks up the line of thought by saying that she sees a stone fireplace with a large roaring fire. Well, they continue building the fantasy scene, alternately adding details. People all around, their faces glowing in the light. No, I only see two people, a man and a woman, shoes off, feet by the hearth. They're sitting very close together, mugs of hot buttered rum in hand.
I've heard
light
of phone
on the butter.
sex, but walkie-talkie sex? This is new.
Toasting one another on splendid runs down the slope. He leans into her, and she into him. And Steele, ready to bring the fantasy to a climax, begins to detail the final action of the scene with, and he gives her a big, warm, but Laura sneezes. Steele looks at his walkie-talkie with a frown, almost as if she'd actually sneezed on him. And then with a resigned tone finishes, handkerchief.
Yeah. This is, and I'm going to have issues with this at the end, but we'll put a pin in this here. This little pin.
You're going to have issues with this, eh?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. I'm trying to imagine what, but okay. Well, now it's morning, and we see that Laura, still in her car, seat leaned back, is, as you said, sleeping.
Yep.
A squeal of tires wakes her up. She sits up, looks around, and then sees a blue sports car coming out of the underground parking garage of Artie's building. An MGBT.
Sure. Whatever you say.
Laura quickly grabs her binoculars and sees that the car in question is, in fact, being driven by Artie, and the car speeds down the road. She calls Steele, telling him Artie has just left and to get down here to the car ASAP. Steele runs down from his perch as Laura races up in the Rabbit. Steele gets into the car and asks where Artie went, but in a frustrated tone, Laura responds that she doesn't know. She lost him. She was watching for someone to try to get into the building, not out. And Steele seems to think that maybe Laura's overreacting a bit, asking how she doesn't know that Artie's not just going out for a carton of milk. And Laura reminds him that they believe that Artie's trying to kill, or that Ray is trying to kill Artie, and that what appears in the strip subsequently happens to him. Steele is still pessimistic, suggesting that by Laura's logic, and I think he questions that use of that term, does that mean that they should be looking out for the nearest jungle? Laura ignores his question, saying that there's got to be some sort of clue in the drawing to help them, and then asking Steele what exactly he remembers about the drawing in the jungle in the drawing. Well, bushes, rocks, vines, a waterfall.
Ding, ding,
And
ding,
he
ding,
stops.
ding.
That's right. They both figured out. Laura puts the car in
Ladies and
gear.
gentlemen, we have a winner.
And they race off. Well, we see a close-up of the waterfall at Raymond Kelly's studio. As the camera slowly pans down the face of the waterfall and pulls out to show more of the room, we hear sounds of an intense struggle. As the camera reveals more, we see disarray. Items are knocked over, thrown about, broken. Then we hear a groan of pain, the sound of something being broken, the sound of a body falling to the floor, then the sound of footsteps. As the sounds of the struggle continue, the camera begins to move in on a comic strip. The first panel shows the blaster and Dick Darkside struggling at the waterfall. The camera pans to show the second panel. The blaster in shadows of the background having thrown Dick Darkside over the waterfall as we hear the sound of someone crying out. Then a splash. Then the camera pans to the final panel showing the blaster saying, "Goodbye, Dick Darkside." The sounds of struggle have ceased. The camera then pans to the pool of water at the base of the waterfall in Kelly's studio. A stream of red floating through the water. Then we see that it's flowing down from the face of the waterfall. We have a time jump as we come back from a commercial break. And in the background, we see a group of men. Two seem to be from the coroner's office and are carrying a gurney up the stairs, a body on it covered. Closer to us, we see Laura approaching a man who is hunched over, seemingly distraught. It's Artie. Laura begins to console Artie, who looks up at her, eyes red, tears on his face, and asks, "He was like a father to me. How could he want to hurt me?"
I gotta say that Artie. One of the things that sinks him here is this, like, he's overdone it to the point of ridiculousness. That's why Laura wasn't quite buying it. That's why Steele, after this, kind of like, no, something's not right. Like, if he broke the man's hand, like, if Artie was smart, if he was a smart killer, wow, I should do we should do a podcast for like how to. No, we shouldn't.
How to commit murder?
It's smart, the smart way. But if he was a smart killer, he would have at least introduced some doubt a little more willingly. He wouldn't have tried to play he would never hurt me. He's a father to me. He's my mentor. I love him so much. He wouldn't have played that as dumb as he did. He played a little too dumb to the point where
it wasn't believable.
It was ridiculous, because even Steele and Laura were like, dude, no, he wasn't like a father to you. He hated you. Everybody knew he hated you. You seem to be the only one who didn't know he hated you. So, come on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not taking Artie's apparent grief into account, perhaps because she's starting to suspect something is not right with this picture, Laura, in a confused tone, asks what prompted Artie to come to Ray's house. Well, Raymond had called him, wanting advice on new storylines, which excited Artie since Raymond had never wanted his opinion before. As Laura places a consoling hand on Artie's shoulder, Steele joins them and tells Artie he's going to have to give his statement to the police. Artie says that he's sorry he didn't let Laura and Steele handle it. He walks off, and then up the stairs and out of the dungeon. Laura compassionately says, "The poor guy." Steele is less than compassionate as he suspiciously says, "So it appears."
The spider senses are tingling.
Yes, causing Laura to turn and look at him, perplexed by his statement and his attitude. Or at least she seems to be. At the office, Mildred is working on the computer. Laura is standing in front of a pile of skiing equipment, trying on skiing outfits. Well, she seems to think that the case is over.
And this is where I'm like, okay, because they had her there, earlier in the episode questioning the whole Raymond Kelly trying to kill Artie thing, and now she's apparently thrown those instincts out the window. Cool.
Yeah.
Because it's necessary for the plot. And I get it. It's funny to watch them switch sides, right? Now Laura's trying to go skiing and Steele's the one. But I wish there was a bit more of a reason for them to switch, because there doesn't really seem to be. She seems to be. This is like that episode where at first she smelled a case and he didn't smell a case, and then it's that same sort of flip around, but this time it doesn't really work because Laura was suspicious of this from the get-go, and there's enough evidence there to suggest, oh, look at this. Coincidentally, Artie's getting everything he ever wanted. Maybe something's not quite right with this picture.
Yeah.
But hey, she looks good in a ski jacket, so.
Yeah. So anyway, Mildred asks about shutting down the office for a week, asking if the boss doesn't really, does he really want Mildred to not hang around and cover the phones? No, they all need a vacation. When Laura asks Mildred if Steele is ready, Mildred responds that she hasn't seen him come out of his office all morning. Well, in his office, Laura confronts him. He's not dressed for a ski trip. He's studying several strips of the blaster. Laura tries to get his attention, but he isn't paying attention, and he tells her that something's not right. He shows Laura one of the strips, pointing out the blue pencil. He explains that it's a non-photo blue, a color that does not reproduce when it's copied. And Laura asks how he knows this, and he begins to tell her that he had a dash of commercial art training but then he stops, realizing he doesn't want to go there. He tells Laura that Artie claimed that this was how he received the artwork, messengered from Ray. But then he shows her another strip taken from Ray's studio. Ray uses black lead. It's on a different paper. In fact, Ray doesn't have any blue pencils or that type of paper anywhere in his studio. Laura accuses him of stalling, and he says, no, he's merely following her lead. She says, no, he isn't, because she's not stalling. Steele corrects her, saying he's following her lead with regard to attention to detail and her compulsion to tie up loose ends.
So I'm curious about, because we know that the skiing with Jean-Claude is a lie, and we know that the polo with Prince Charles is a lie. The dash of commercial art training, is that a lie? Or because from what we know of his past, he didn't really have any formal schooling beyond whatever he would have done when he was being passed from relative to relative to relative. We get the impression that once he was on his own on the street, whatever schooling he might have still been required to complete was just not completed. He probably doesn't have a high school education, so I'm just kind of curious as to where he would. I'm not saying he because we've seen him draw before, so we know he can. But I'm just kind of curious as to whether or not that's him bullcrapping, or if there's some sort of commercial art training that he received somewhere.
Well, the comment about playing polo with Charles and the skiing with Jean-Claude, those were conscious, intentional statements. Yeah.
And he does stop himself, so I agree.
And in this case, he's not really paying attention to what she's saying enough. He's paying attention enough that he understands what she's saying, but he's not giving it a full focus of his attention. And so when she says, well, how do you know? And he just starts to rattle it off just automatically. This is not something he thought about saying as part of a scenario. And then he stops himself.
In the comments, it suggests he may have taken a class at art school to get close to an heiress type mark.
And that's where I was going to go, is that
I would like to read this. Someone needs to write this.
I wasn't going to necessarily
that's
include
cool.
the heiress part, but I did figure that, he had some training as part of a scam at some point. And
that makes sense. That does make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
I can buy that, because he could forge his credentials, whatever would be needed to get in, and then, yeah. Because maybe, maybe they needed somebody who could draw up a portrait or a painting or something in order to pull off some sort of heist, or I don't know. Yeah, that's a good point.
So Laura says there's no loose ends, case is closed. They have plane reservations. Steele stands, accuses her of having a slapdash approach to the case, calling it absolutely unfathomable.
Where's his work ethic coming from? Where? I'm sorry, where? Because we have seen evidence in the past of there's clearly still a case, but he doesn't care. He's just like, you know what? Let's go. Let's let Tony and Terry get killed because we have tickets for 42nd Street or whatever.
Can you blame him for wanting to let Tony and Terry get killed? Can you blame him?
Absolutely not. In fact, I encourage it. But what I'm saying is that, where is this sudden work ethic coming from where he has to
No, it's not a work ethic.
Yeah.
Something that Artie has done, something in his attitude, something there has just rubbed Steele the wrong way. And it's a burr under his saddle that he cannot get over until
fair. That I could see. He doesn't like to have a con. He doesn't want to be conned. I can see that. Yeah.
So Laura calls him a devious man, suggesting that the only reason he invites her on these trips is because he's certain she'll say no. But now she's calling his bluff and he's getting cold feet. Well, ego challenged. Steele stacks up the strips and slides them into a folder. Then, with folder in his hand, uses the other to grab his coat, tosses it over his shoulder, and says, "After you, Miss Holt." Next, we see them driving through the streets of L.A. Steele begins giving directions to Laura as she drives and rhapsodizes about their pending ski adventure. But Steele is clearly distracted, paying only token attention to her. After a bit, Steele instructs her to pull over to the curb. Curious?
She goes on about a fireplace, hot tub, and a jacuzzi. A hot tub and a jacuzzi.
Mm-hmm.
What? Isn't that overkill? If it's in the same room? Like, I realize that a jacuzzi is a tub and a hot tub is a tub. That
it's kind of like they're the same thing.
Yeah, like why would you want both in the room? That's what I'm wondering.
Who knows? Who knows?
Okay.
I guess certain things for certain place, certain, and then other things.
Like, that's been a lovely soak in the jacuzzi. I think I'll go clean off in the hot tub.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway. Or there are certain things that you can do in one that you can't do in the other. I don't know.
Well, I have it on good authority. You can do it in both, but
Anyway, they stop in front of Speedy Express, the company that gets stuff delivered. Steele grabs the folder and goes inside.
Never not funny.
Inside, the clerk is looking at the delivery receipt that Steele has handed him, telling him that, yes, the receipt is theirs, but they didn't deliver the package indicated to Artie. In fact, they've never delivered anything from a Raymond Kelly to an Arthur Wayne. Well, Laura has entered in time to hear the last part of that exchange and then asks Steele, "What are we doing here?" Steele says he's just trying to get the answers to a few nagging questions. Now, the clerk, who has been looking through their records, says that they do show that they've been delivering packages from Arthur Wayne to Raymond Kelly.
The plot thickens.
Yes. Next, we see Laura and Steele sitting in the Rabbit near the top of a canyon road with tight switchbacks. Steele now is in the driver's seat. Laura points out that they're nowhere near the airport. Hello, Laura, you just noticed that?
Well, I was thinking that because I'm not familiar with LA geography, but I know Toronto geography, and I know that I would notice if I were driving to Pearson and suddenly found myself in Scarborough or, Barrie. Like, you would know, like, those highways are a pain in the rear. And if you find yourself on, down Yonge Street or something like that, hey, this doesn't look like the airport. Shouldn't we be at the airport?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, according to the transcript that we have from Steele and Love, this would be the Malibu Canyon Road. And yes, if you are, Malibu Canyon Road is one direction. The airport is another direction. And just from driving the wrong direction, she should have had a clue that they weren't going to the airport. And then especially when they started driving up the hills, into the hills, she should have had a clue.
Given how often they go to the airport. Even if they don't get on a plane, they seem to be there quite a bit. So,
and Laura grew up around L.A. She should know that, hey, we're not going to the airport. What are you doing, Steele?
Yeah.
Anyway, Laura thinks Steele is trying to avoid going away with her. And he says he's just wanting to check out Artie's story. After all, if he lied about receiving the waterfall strip from Ray, he might have lied about the harrowing, out-of-control drive down the canyon. Laura says, hey, he nearly died. Steele doesn't say anything for a moment and then says, How to Murder Your Wife.
This
Jack
is his
Lemmon.
First movie reference.
Jack Lemmon, Vernie Lisi, United Artists, 1965. Lemmon plays a cartoonist who has a habit of acting out things before he puts them into his strip. Laura says that Artie only drew what Ray gave him. Steele again looks at her without saying anything, then gets out of the car, walks around to the passenger side, and then challenges Laura. If she's so convinced that Artie was the victim of an attempt on his life, well, then she should be able to make it from where they're at to the point where his car went off the road without using any brakes.
Isn't her insurance high enough as it is? Like, I'm sorry, but the rabbit here has gone through enough justice for the rabbit. Like, this is just getting out of hand.
You have to wonder if there's anything left on the rabbit that's original from when it was manufactured. You know, every panel, every component of it's probably been replaced at least twice.
Well, and also they could die. This challenge isn't just some, like, simple. And not only that, Artie didn't actually need to have the accident to lie to them about it.
Well, that's true too.
He could have I mean, yes, they see that there were tire tracks and stuff like that, but he could have easily just put a car into gear and have it drive off the road.
If he's halfway smart, he would have staged one so that he's got a police report. So that if they looked into it.
Okay, but they haven't.
Details.
Okay. All I'm saying is, like, this is a really stupid way to prove a point.
Yeah, especially considering how stubborn he has accused Laura of being.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, come on. You know for a fact she's going to take
control
of the...
That's right. I'm losing control of the car. I'm losing control. You need to stop. In fact, while they're on the run, Steele does. He says, stop. No, if we're going to prove it, I've got to do it just like Artie.
Yeah, and he knows how exuberant her driving can get. So, I mean, this is just a death wish in motion right here.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so Laura does get behind the wheel and heads down the mountain, and it's getting a wilder and wilder ride. And like I said, Steele urges her to begin at least braking with some discretion. And she, as I said, hollers that if the test's going to prove anything, she's got to do it just like Artie. And then after missing several head-on collisions and nearly losing control of the car, she finally hits the brakes, spinning the car onto a wide shoulder of the road, but nearly off the edge of a sharp drop-off.
Yep.
And asks, as she's blowing the hair out of her face, asks Steele how Artie could have done it. Moreover, how could he have done it at night? Well,
that's a good point.
Yeah. Well, next we're at the point where Artie's accident had reportedly and apparently taken place. The two find skid marks leading to the broken barricade at the side of the road. They realize that a car without brakes wouldn't have left those particular marks. That at the speed Artie was going, he wouldn't have survived a jump from his car, or at the very least, he would have barely survived. And add to the fact that Artie was sending material to Ray and not the other way around, Artie well could have been the author, artist, and inker. And now with Ray dead, Artie has control of the blaster. At the memorial service for Ray, before it begins, Artie thanks Laura and Steele for coming. As a thank you gift, he gives them a color drawing of Steele and Laura, saying that he hopes Laura is pleased with the changes he's made to Dollface. Artie goes to the front of the chapel, and standing next to a poster of the blaster, Artie delivers a tearful eulogy, but Steele isn't buying it. Laura seems perplexed, although I'm not sure what she should be perplexed about at this point. I mean, it should be.
Yeah. This is pretty obvious. This is more than obvious.
Something's wrong. Even if she doesn't know what's wrong at this point, something is wrong.
Well,
she knows that.
I don't know. A particularly stupid Cocker Spaniel, I think, at this point could figure out that Artie set this up to get everything he wanted.
Yeah, but, it could just be that she doesn't want to believe it. But
I mean, I get that, because Artie has this way about him that seems to work well with women, especially where he plays this sad little puppy dog that they have to take care of. There's a lot of puppy metaphors here. I didn't mean to do so intentionally, but there we are. Whereas Steele maybe doesn't fall prey to that trap because he's not attracted to Artie. I don't know.
But if she was fighting with herself about whether he was doing it or not, she shouldn't seem perplexed. She should seem, I don't know what, but it would be a different emotion. But anyway, Artie is, as he's going through his eulogy, suddenly seems to be too broken up to continue. Sid rushes up to console him, and after Artie takes his seat, Sid steps up to the front. He asks for the indulgence of those there to just say a few words about Artie before he speaks about Ray. Sid announces that Artie has decided that the blaster should retire. Well, this seems to crash their theory, since it seems to eliminate motive. But then Sid announces that Artie would be starting a new strip that he created. Well,
this is an odd announcement at a funeral.
They have, yeah.
You know,
Well, they have a resurrected motive.
I mean, I get announcing that he's decided to let the blaster rest because that would seem like a mark of respect for the creator to say, like, we're not going to make any more of these because this strip lives and dies with you. But coming soon to a paper near you, folks, at your favorite funeral.
Yeah.
Seems like a weird place to do that. But
yeah, but it's Sid trying to commend Artie for being so selfless and so thoughtful.
Yeah.
Because he says that he's decided to let the blaster rest. He's basically giving up this strip that was so popular and so loved that he's worked on for so long. He has such an affinity and such a love for this strip, but look at how courageous he is to give it up.
A great humanitarian. Yeah, I agree.
That's right.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So now they have a resurrected motive, but now they need proof. Back at the office, Steele looks on as Laura is looking through a stack of documents. She's found a disturbing pattern of events. Artie started dating Cindy Dirks 3 months ago. Ray's wife died 3 months ago. Artie took his new strip idea to Sid 3 months ago. The characters of Dashing Dave and Dollface were added to the pages of the blaster 3 months ago. Steele is astounded and offended, realizing that Artie has been planning this murder for 3 months.
Oh, yeah, and he doesn't like being set up.
and he knew that Laura and himself would be the perfect patsies to corroborate his story.
Yeah. And I think maybe he's also a little ticked off that Artie was able to play into his vanity. Because you cannot convince me that part of the reason why Steele bought this story so readily was because he liked having Dashing Dave as his likeness.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was all part of the plan.
Yeah.
So anyway, Laura says that whatever drove Artie to murder must have happened 3 months ago, and maybe there's a clue in Ray's house. She gets up, goes to the door, rushes out of the office, knocking over the skis in the process. Steele picks up the skis and hollers after her, "What about the ski trip?" Laura calls back asking, is that all he can think of?
It's your own fault, dude. She was ready to go.
Well,
but yeah,
given that Steele was the one who started them down this road of logic and only moments earlier was offended at the notion that Artie had begun setting them up as patsies 3 months earlier.
I know. It's dumb. It's a dumb line.
Why? I can't believe he's asking this question.
No, yeah, like it's almost like he. Yeah, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. I was trying to find a justification for it. I can't, so we'll just keep going.
Hand wave.
Yep.
They're back in the dungeon at Ray's house. Steele's pulling a contract out of the wall safe that had been hidden inside the rock wall of the waterfall. It's a contract between Ray and Artie, which brings up a problem, which Steele describes as a document of indentured servitude. Artie was bound exclusively to Ray for 7 years, and anything Artie created during that period automatically became property of Raymond Kelly, which would have included the new strip that Artie had previously offered Sid. And thoughtfully, Steele says that it appears that they might have a solid motive, but no proof. But then he smiles and says, "Gaslight, Ingrid Bergman, Charles Boyer, MGM, 1944. And a smile dawns on Laura's face as she realizes Steele's meaning. And she tells him she likes his choice of film.
And it's interesting that they don't explain the plot here. I'm assuming they, A, don't want to do that because it would give away what they're planning to do, and B, they're presuming the audience probably knows it, but...
Yeah. So anyway, next we see Artie coming home to his apartment. He is all cheerful and singing some sort of tune to himself. He sits down on his couch, which is in front of a large set of windows and glass doors facing outside. He pulls out the newspaper, opens up to the comic page, probably expecting to see his strip make its debut, but instead he sees the blaster.
Dun, dun, dun.
The first frame shows a large floor safe being raised up the side of a tall building by a crane mounted to the roof of the building, and the words "squeak, squeak, squeak" in the frame. And as he's looking at the strip in disbelief, he hears a squeak, 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 causing him to turn around and see a grand piano being hoisted up past his window.
Where did they get the piano? Was it Laura's? Is it Laura's piano? Did they just like?
Well, I mean, it could be.
Right,
I wouldn't imagine. I can't imagine she would give it up for this, but.
Where did they get the crane?
How did they mount it to the roof?
Does he have a license to operate heavy machinery? Like, what is going on here? This seems like an awful lot to set up in the space of 10 minutes.
Yeah. Well, no, they had a day. 2.
Okay,
maybe.
fine.
Okay. But still, I mean, how are you going to get up to the top of the building? How are you going to get the crane up there? How are you going to get it secured? How are you going to get permission from the property owner to do it?
Yeah. Yeah, my notes just say how. Just how. That's the entirety of my notes.
Enough of a question. How?
Yeah, how?
Well, in the second frame of the strip, we see the straps holding the safe snap, with the third frame showing the safe falling to crush Dick Darkside. Artie stands, staring at the piano as it continues to slowly squeak, 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 up past his windows. He rushes out of the apartment, down to the front entry, and then out of the building and down the stairs, hugging the sides of the stairs to avoid being under the suspended piano.
Why?
And then he runs off in a panic.
If you're seeing this thing has this thing falling on top of you and it's outside your apartment, logically, wouldn't you just say, okay, all I have to do is stay in here and it's not going to fall on my head?
Well, he's rushing off to confront Sid.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, still, I would stay. I would stay put.
I'd make a phone call. Make a phone call to avoid. Yeah,
I'd invite Sid over. Hey, Sid.
Yeah, yeah. Don't worry about the piano that's hanging out. You know, it just.
Yeah,
you just go ahead and walk under it. You know,
it's fine.
Well, next we see that it's Laura and Steele in work clothes on the top of the building, and of course, it was them pulling up the piano past Artie's apartment. And then now we are at the scenes of the Allied Press Syndicate, where we see Sid Rothman and Cindy Dirks at his desk when Artie comes in. Sid stands to greet Artie, who says that he saw today's paper and was surprised to see the blaster, and asks if Ray had some extra strips that he didn't know about. Sid laughs, saying that a young, talented guy came in to him, said he loved the strip, that he grew up with it, and couldn't bear to see it die. This guy had 2 years worth of strips and ideas, some of them ready to be inked, so he jumped at the deal, bringing this guy on board to continue the strip. Well, Artie's clearly distressed. So too, it seems, is Cindy Dirks, saying that she thought Sid wanted to let the blaster rest in Ray's memory. Sid says, don't you get it? Ray was the blaster, and what better way to honor his memory and keep him alive than by keeping the strip alive? Artie tries to argue, but all he can get out is, but, before Sid grabs his arm and tells him to rush on home because this new guy's going to be sending over strips for him to be inked right away. Okay, can I point out that unless there are some facts to which we are not privy, Artie is under no obligation to do anything on the strip. His contract was with Raymond Kelly, not the syndicate. So unless there were some terms in the contract which transferred, or some contract somewhere, which transferred his obligation to the syndicate, his obligation to Raymond Kelly died with Raymond Kelly. And of course, then there's this whole thing about anything you create belongs to me clause. But as long as the contract doesn't see the light of day, Artie is off the hook for all of it.
Well, he's also out of a job, though.
Well,
so I'm assuming that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
If this wasn't a setup, if this was a legitimate thing, that because I'm assuming Sid is in on it at this point, that they've called up Sid and said, right. But if this wasn't a setup and this had legitimately happened, I'm assuming Sid would be excited to tell Artie that because he would assume that Artie would want the work. Because if Artie walks away, he's out of any work.
Fair enough. But, you destroyed another argument of mine.
There we go.
You are now banished with the commenters. Anyway, Cindy rushes to ask Sid, well, what about Artie's strip? And Sid chides her, telling her that she knows that there's only so much room in the paper for strips, so Artie's strip is just going to have to wait. Well, Artie turns and leaves, very unhappy, and Cindy rushes out past Sid to follow. Out in the hall, Artie starts throwing a temper tantrum, banging his fists on the wall and pouting. How could he do this to me? He promised I could do my own strip. Cindy tries to calm Artie, telling him that everything will be okay. But Artie's pity party is in full swing and he won't listen.
Yeah. And I mean, tell me you have no conscience. This is a perfect example because he's not mad that he murdered a guy for no reason. He's mad that he murdered a guy and didn't get what he wanted to get out of it. And
yeah.
So like, he's like, oh man, you mean I killed somebody for nothing? Now
who do I got to kill?
Now who do I have to murder? Gosh.
And so he jerks out of Cindy's grasp and stomps away. Next, we see Artie arriving back at his apartment to find a large envelope addressed to him sitting outside the front door. It's the new blaster strips ready to ink. He takes the envelope into his apartment, tosses the strips on his table, and then begins to read them. Yes?
No.
Oh, okay. It sounded like you had a comment.
Nope, nothing to say.
Well, you do. You're just holding it. Anyway.
No, not for here. Not for here.
But that's what I said. You got something to say. You're just holding it.
There's a pin for later. Yeah.
That's right. Well, the strip he sees shows skid marks, like at the scene of the car, or at the scene of the accident where the car had run off the cliff in the comic strip. And then Steele, Dashing Dave, is examining them, telling Dollface Laura, I think he planned the whole thing. Artie gets more and more tense and more aggravated as he reads the second strip showing Dick Darkside standing over the body of the blaster, claiming that he had to do it. He was going to blast me. Then Dashing Dave pointing an accusing finger saying, you murdered him and I can prove it. In a fit of anger, Artie throws the strips off the desk onto the floor. He grabs the envelope to read the return address. 1313 Blaster Way, Santa Barbara. Getting even more stressed, Artie grabs the phone and begins dialing. Back at Raymond Kelly's castle, it's night, and fog has settled in as Artie drives up. He pulls a gun out of the glove box and begins walking toward the castle, holding the gun tucked inside his jacket. Inside, Laura and Remington are waiting for Artie. But outside, someone else is waiting. We see shots of the gargoyles on the top of the castle, and a pair of gloved hands grab the horns of one. And as Artie comes to the front door, the gloved hands push the gargoyle off the roof, and it comes crashing down on Artie, crushing him. And
now I have some comments. One, I'm sorry. I would like to know who Raymond Kelly's contractor is, because your gargoyle should not be able to fall that easily.
Your
gargoyle's
off your roof. Loose. Yes.
Like you need to secure those. But two, I get it. The blood's not real on Remington Steele. But when they go out and they see him laying there and the crushed rock next to him and his face is still intact, I'm like, no.
Or any part of him is still intact.
His face would be pulp. He would be a sticky spot on the pavement.
Yeah. Well,
they can't show that. I get it. This is a hand wave I'm perfectly willing to do, but it is kind of funny because it's just like, that's solid stone and it just fell off a roof.
Yeah. And it was loose to begin with. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, inside, Laura and Steele hear the impact, and that's not part of their plan.
No.
So they rush outside to find Artie on the ground, major portion of the gargoyle next to him with pieces scattered around his body. Laura comments that Steele's comic strip was frighteningly prophetic, and then asks if either of them would buy it being an accident. Well, Laura and Steele go back into the castle and then slowly begin walking up the stairs. Once again, Laura equates their situation with Psycho. And as she begins relating the scene of the movie where the detective climbs the stairs only to be set upon by a woman with a butcher knife. And as they reach the top of the stairs, Steele begins to assure her that this isn't Psycho and that there isn't, and it suddenly is, complete with the appropriate music.
Yeah, and I gotta wonder if there's. I have to wonder if they we've been talking about licensing and music rights and stuff like that. Would there be enough changed here that they wouldn't have to pay, or would they have had to pay to get the rights to use that sound or that music?
I don't know. That's clearly that little instrumental phrase is associated with Psycho, but is that enough that it would even be an issue? I don't know.
But and fun incidentally, do you know how that got inserted into the film? Do you know the story
Mm-mm.
behind that?
Mm-mm.
So, the film itself, Psycho, was very difficult to make. Hitchcock was contracted to the studio for another film. He had nothing up his sleeve until he read the novel. Somebody sent it to him. He read it. And the studios read it too. And they're like, no, this is like end of the Hays Code, but still kind of in that range of like, this is too controversial. We can't do this film. So he said, well, if I pay for it, will you release it under the studio's banner? And they're like, yeah, you pay for it, sure. So he mortgaged his house to get Psycho made. That one of the reasons that it's in black and white, despite them having color, is because it was too expensive.
It was less expensive.
So, but this scene in particular, he wanted it to be entirely silent. He didn't want any music. And if you look at the scene up until that, there's pretty much no diegetic sound at all. You see her go to the bathroom, she flushes the toilet, she gets in, she turns on the shower. It's all just background like noise of what she's doing.
Mm-hmm.
It was his wife that said like, hey, there's got to be something here to make the audience jump. And she put that in there, and he was like, oh, yeah, that works. So, yeah, it was actually Hitchcock's wife that put that in there. But yeah.
Well, as this is happening, the music is going. A figure dressed in black from head to toe comes charging out, butcher knife in hand.
Yeah.
Laura and Steele grab at the figure, then all three fall down the stairs in a single tangled knot, struggling against not only gravity but each other. At the bottom of the stairs, the struggle continues momentarily until Laura manages to gain a hold of the knife, giving Remington the chance to grab the figure and rip off the black ski mask.
This is
to
a very
reveal
Scooby-Doo. This is a Scooby-Doo moment. Cindy? And I got to say,
I would have gotten away with it if it hadn't been for you meddling kids.
Little criticism for Cindy here, because she's done everything right so far up until this point. Why not shoot them? Why run at them with a knife? Find a gun, shoot them.
Well, because she didn't have a gun, but she had the knife to pry that gargoyle loose from the...
That's true. That's all it took. But yeah, this is very Scooby-Doo. Hey, look, it's Cindy. We did not know. What a crazy random happenstance.
Well, next we have a time jump. Laura's at her desk on the phone with Sid Rothman, expressing their appreciation at his assistance in clearing the case. Steele comes in, slipping on his ski jacket. After she hangs up, she passes along a message from Sid Rothman to Remington, saying that he shows great promise as a cartoonist, and there's an opening for him on the comic page. Remington comments that it's difficult to believe that Cindy masterminded the entire scheme. Laura says that she was desperate to share credit with Artie on the new strip, and Steele adds that it would have worked if their gaslight plan hadn't worked so well in pushing Artie over the edge. But Cindy was frightened that Artie would botch up his attempt to kill them and then confess everything. As Laura announces the case closed, she raises a bandaged, sprained ankle onto the desk.
Okay. Ignore my pin. Take my pin out and throw it away. I screwed up.
You want to explain?
Okay, because I forgot it was an injury that sidelined her here.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and to my defense, I made these notes a while ago because we had some issues with scheduling. But I think
we won't talk about that.
Yeah, I think when I first watched this and was making notes, her sneeze in the car made me think, oh, she's going to end up getting a cold because she was outside in the cold. And this drives me nuts when I see it in film and television, because being outside in the cold does not give you a cold. A virus gives you a cold, period. This whole you'll catch your death of cold nonsense that has been sort of played out in film and television drives me up the wall, because simply being outside that's not how it happens. You have cold and flu season happen in the winter because most often than not, people are inside and they are catching viruses and colds from other people who are inside because it's cold outside. But you can't just get a cold from going outside.
Well, if you're outside and you're cold and your body is expending more energy to keep your body, your core, your limbs warm, does that make you more susceptible to viruses? That could be. Bingo! Right? There you go. That's
but being outside in and of itself is not, because like you'll see this in movies all the time where somebody's like out in the rain and then and nobody's around. They're just out in the
Mhm.
rain. And then the next scene, they're like, they've got the thing on their head and they've got
Mhm.
a thermometer in their mouth. They're like, I was outside. Now I've got a cold. Anyway,
Yeah.
for some reason I thought, and I hadn't checked ahead in my notes, I thought that was what sidelined her.
Okay.
And it seems odd that they had her sneeze and then it's the ankle that ends up being the thing that keeps. Anyway, ignore my pin. Throw my pin away. My pin is useless. I was wrong. Keep going.
Well,
And,
you know,
but also, why couldn't she go anyway and just not go skiing? She still have the hot tub, the jacuzzi, apparently in the room, and she could like watch TV. And also,
she didn't want to go.
He could go and not go skiing, and they could spend the whole time in the bedroom. This seems like a win-win for everybody. I'm just saying. Mildred could go skiing.
Yeah. Anyway, Laura announces the case closed, puts her sprained ankle on the desk, and calls it a souvenir of her tumble down the stairs with Steele and Cindy on their way. And it's also her way out of the ski trip. Mildred comes in carrying skis, suited up to hit the slopes, saying that she can't wait to try out her new skis. Steele frowns. What's this? Laura laughs. Mildred says that she'll wait in the car and leaves. And with a slightly evil tone in her voice, Laura tells Steele that Mildred's been saying how much she wanted to learn to ski. And since all the reservations are for two, Steele tries to protest, but Laura tells him not to worry about her. She's got plenty of work to keep herself busy. Steele grimaces, calling it another missed opportunity and saying that it looks like they're never going to get together. After
on
Steele
the one hand, it's funny to watch her stick it to him. But on the other hand, she's kind of like depriving herself
juvenile.
As well. Even if not, like, yeah, she could have gone. She could have enjoyed a week off where she's chilling out in a ski lodge and enjoying the hot buttered rum and everything else that goes with it, aside from
light
the
on
skiing.
the butter.
Exactly, and it just seems like she's avoiding it just to kind of like stick it to him, which is
yep, that's exactly it. Well, that plus. I think it's twofold, what you said about sticking it to him, but also the fact that she didn't really want to go in the first place. And she only said she was going to do it because he was pushing her buttons and she felt like she had to, or it was just a natural reaction of hers to respond and say she would. But this gave her the out that she really wanted all along anyway, because she didn't want to go.
Well, and maybe didn't want to go under those conditions, right?
Okay.
Like this was not a vacation she had planned
right
willingly. This was something she was goaded into. So I guess there's maybe that element of it where and kind of the comedy of, hey, now you're teaching Mildred to ski. Have fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is also a comment here saying in winter the humidity goes down inside, so without a humidifier, viruses breed faster and stronger. Back to my rant on cold. So yes, that is true. But just being outside. But yeah, so she's chilling out, and actually this kind of like, yeah, she's gonna catch up on work, but she's also probably gonna have some time to herself too. So
yes,
she's getting a bit of vacation.
Yeah, this is not the vacation that Steele wanted to set her up with.
No.
Anyway, after Steele leaves, Laura picks up the drawing that Artie had given them earlier, looks at it, and in response to his comment about them never getting together, says, "Don't bet on it, Mr. Steele." And then we see a portion of the drawing that we didn't previously see. It's a caption balloon showing Dashing Dave asking, "What now, Dollface?" And another caption balloon of Dollface responding, "Kiss me, Dashing." And there we freeze.
Yep. It's a cute episode. I mean,
it is. It's fun. I mean, it's got its issues, but it's fun. Yeah.
It's one of those episodes that I sometimes forget, and not because it's not any good, but just because there are so many other really good episodes that surround it that it doesn't really come to mind until I'm watching it. I'm like, oh yeah, I like this one. This is a good one.
Well, it's like we talked about earlier that there's so many good episodes, especially season 2 and 3, that it's harder for any single episode to stand out, because it's like the difference between having a score of a 90 when everybody else has got a 50 and having a score of a 90 when everybody else is between 85 and 95. You know, it's not the same.
it's easier to remember the bad or the inconsistent episodes.
Mm-hmm.
The episodes that had really high highs, but also like really low lows that kind of, yeah. But this is solid. This is a good solid episode. Good plot, good twist, good mystery. Some silliness, but there's always some silliness. And
sure.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
No, I think that's it for me.
All right. Well, then we will remind everybody about the website, SteeleWatching.com. You will find show notes, Amazon links for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 movies this time.
Yeah, there's a lot in this one.
Yeah. And then a link to other resources that we have available for you, such as...
We have the fan page, the Twitter and Instagram page, as well as the officially unofficial Steele Watchers Facebook page, or Facebook group, where we talk about all things Remington Steele and some things that are sometimes not, but adjacently related. We also have stuff on our own site where you can buy us a coffee or support us or buy some merch. There's links to merch, like my 1-star review shirt that I have on right now, which is one of my favorites. So yeah, you could go there and you can get those fun things.
Yeah, all right. And the next episode is going to be Steele in the Chips.
Yeah.
Which is a fairly polarizing episode.
Yeah, it is. Which poll are you going to be on? Wait a minute. No.
Not the one down at the local club.
Which side are we apologizing are we a fan or are we not a fan? I'm just curious as to where we're going with this.
I'm kind of in the middle on that one.
Okay, fair enough. Me too. I think most of my issues are gonna be the order where the episode appears.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad episode. It's just not necessarily one of the most beloved.
Yeah, fair.
We'll put it that way.
We'll get into more details when we get there.
Really? Well, all right. Hey, thank you to everybody that joined us in the live stream today and doing their comments. We appreciate that. And
awesome.
I guess we're done. So we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, everybody. Eric and Sara here. Just a quick announcement to let you know that, yes, we do appreciate everyone who listens, participates, and supports the podcast in whatever way you do. But we wanted to give an extra thank you to those who are so graciously giving to be monthly financial supporters.
We are making live streams of our recording sessions available to anyone who is a monthly financial supporter. So not only can you watch us live as we record our podcast episodes, you will be getting access to the raw, behind-the-scenes, unedited version of episodes before they get officially released.
And Sara, does that include our mistakes and screw-ups and our humiliating?
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
every
it does.
Single one of them.
Every single one of them, yes. So again, this is just an extra thank you to those who are going above and beyond. But whether you choose to become a monthly financial supporter or not, we still love you. We want to say we thank you for your support, your encouragement, and your feedback.
If you want to become a monthly financial supporter, please visit our website at www.steelewatching.com to sign up.